Can you hear mute by hitting that?
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Good evening. I will call to order the Monday, August 9th, 2021 meeting of the Oregon City Planning Commission. Before we begin, I don't think we have any, but I'm going to ask, are there any public comments on items not on the agenda?
We have not received any at this point.
All right, thank you. And then before I begin, I just wanted to say thank you all for attending. This is by far the largest group of people we've ever had at one of our meetings. And we appreciate you being here, and we appreciate you spending your evening with us. All right. Let's move on. First item on the agenda, item number 1, GLUA-21-000019, CU21-00002, the Father's Heart Street Ministry Conditional Use Permit for Warming Shelter. It's a quasi-judicial hearing, so I will read the quasi-judicial script. One public hearing on land use applications is scheduled tonight. Our role is to conduct a public hearing and to make decisions about the matter before us. In making those decisions, we must apply the applicable codes and laws and cannot vary from or change those laws or codes. Members of the Planning Commission are to be unbiased. Before the start of the hearing, I will ask the planning commissioners whether they have any potential conflicts, such as family, financial, or business relationships with any of the applicants or with regard to the land in question. I will also ask whether any of the planning commissioners have discussed the application in question with any of the parties or have independent knowledge of relevant facts, such as from a visit to the site in question. Any member of the audience may question any planning commissioner about their disclosures. A staff report has been prepared for each application and has been made available to the public 7 days before the first public hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to each applicant's proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report. The quasi-judicial hearing procedure that the Planning Commission will follow is set out in state law and the Oregon City Municipal Code. The hearing procedure steps are shown on the Planning Commission website, and I don't see them on the wall. Public testimony will be called on in the order it was requested in advance of the meeting. If you have not emailed city staff at planning@oregoncity.org to request to speak and would like to testify, please raise your virtual hand or physical hand when I ask if there are others in the audience who would like to participate. And now, since we're having an in-person meeting again, make sure you've got your comment cards turned in so we give you a chance to speak. Now I've got to find my spot. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name and city of residence. We don't need your complete address unless you would like to receive a copy of the notice of decision. Then you can state your mailing address or your email address. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. Any person may submit written material while the public record is open on each application. Any written materials received by the city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to the city staff in order to become part of the record. If a person intends for PowerPoint presentations, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in their oral testimony to be placed in the record, copies must be submitted to the city staff while the record is open. If they are not given to staff, they will not be included in the record. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional evidence and testimony or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the hearing is closed. If the Planning Commission makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue that you may wish to appeal must have been raised on the record for the consideration of the City Commission or LUBA or both. Without raising the issue on the record with sufficient detail and accompanied by statements or evidence that the city and all parties can respond to, the issue will not be deemed appealable to the City Commission or State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, the failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient detail to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes any action for damages in circuit court. All right. Now, the soccer game? Okay. We will now open the record for Oregon City file number GLUA-21-00019 and CU21-0002, a request for the Father's Heart Street Ministry conditional use permit for a warming shelter. We will now ask each planning commissioner if they have any ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, bias, or any other statement to declare or have visited the site. If there was a site visit, the planning commissioner must declare what they perceived. Okay, no particular order. Commissioner West, any conflicts of interest, ex parte contact? Did you visit the site?
I have no conflicts of interest, no ex parte contact, and no bias. I will declare, though, that I am a resident of the McLaughlin neighborhood, and I haven't gone by that site since the last meeting that we have, so nothing more to add there. So,
okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mitchell, ex parte contact, conflicts of interest, site visit.
No ex parte conflicts, no bias, no conflict of interest. I did visit the site prior to the last hearing, so for the sake of those that didn't hear that, I visited the site. Just walked around the block. My intention was to refresh my memory on the proximity of this facility to the neighboring homes. And I guess the only thing I would say about an impression is, yeah, there are homes close by.
Thank you. Commissioner Gage, any conflicts of interest, ex parte contact? Did you visit the site?
I have no ex parte contact, no conflicts of interest. I did visit the site prior to our last hearing, drove into the parking lot, looked around the neighborhood. I do see the close proximity to the park and, of course, the neighboring homes.
Thank you. And finally, Commissioner Staggs, any ex parte contact, conflicts of interest, bias, or did you visit the site?
I did not visit the site. I know where the site is. I've been by there many times before. I have no ex parte contact and no conflict of interest.
Okay, thank you. And then as for myself, I have no conflicts of interest, no ex parte contact, no bias. I have not been to the site since the last time we had a meeting. And then what I saw prior to that meeting was there's houses nearby. I did not see anybody hanging around, but it was I don't remember what day of the week. It wasn't in operation at the time. But during those 2 days I went by, I didn't see anything. And so now I'll ask, does anyone in the audience wish to question any of the commissioners about their disclosures? Okay, seeing none, we will now commence with the planning staff report. Is that this, Mrs. Diliana?
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm Diliana Vasiliva. I'm the assistant planner for the city, and I'll be presenting the staff report for the Father's Heart Street Ministry conditional use permit. The subject site is located at the corner of 12th Street and Washington Street. It's approximately half an acre in size, and it's developed with an existing building and parking lot surrounding properties. It's zoned mixed-use corridor, and surrounding properties include residential zoning as well as mixed-use downtown zoning. The property is developed with the Father's Heart Street Ministry, which is a day-use shelter serving low and no-income populations. For the past 4 years, each year, they have also received approval through an emergency resolution from the City Commission, which has allowed them to operate as an emergency warming shelter on nights that the temperature is forecasted to fall below 33 degrees. Over those past 4 years, they've served approximately 2,100 guests over 43 nights, resulting in an average of approximately 11 nights a year that the warming shelter is operating. So with this application, the applicant is requesting a conditional use permit which would allow them to operate as a warming shelter without having to ask the City Commission for an emergency resolution to allow them to do that each year. The definition of temporary warming shelter is in our code, and it is defined as a shelter operating between the hours of 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. when the outside temperature is predicted to be 33 degrees or below, including wind chill factor as measured by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So with the requested application, there are a few things that are outside of the scope of our review. Number one, the existing day use shelter is a legal non-conforming use that is allowed to continue and is not part of this review. Number two, no alterations to the building or site are being proposed, so any design standards and dimensional standards are not part of this review. Number three, the site is within a historic district, but historic design guidelines don't apply to the project since no new construction is being proposed. And historic review applies only to building design, not land uses. And lastly, since we're dealing with a shelter, there are some federal protections from the Americans with Disabilities Act and Fair Housing Act that prohibit discrimination, restricting access to housing based on personal circumstances, race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. The characteristics of or circumstances affecting residents who may choose to reside in the proposed shelter are not relevant approval criteria that this application is subject to. So as with any other application, your decision is based on applicable criteria within our code. This presentation doesn't include all of the applicable criteria for conditional use permits that are in the staff report, but I wanted to focus on some of the more pertinent criteria that we've received a lot of public comments about. Starting with the conditional use permit criteria that is specific to shelters. Our code requires that the shelter maintain a written community engagement plan which includes information about the description of purpose and scope of services of the shelter, population to be housed at the shelter, and the process and criteria for selection of guests, bed capacity for nightly guests, hours of operations or curfew, 24-hour contact information, and explanation of how the shelter will address concerns and complaints. Our code also requires that shelters hold a community meeting prior to commencing operation, as well as a minimum of once a year, each year thereafter. So the applicant has submitted a draft community engagement plan, and we also have a condition of approval to finalize that plan at the community meeting that they're required to hold prior to beginning operation. And we also have a condition of approval to submit the final version of the community engagement plan to the city, as well as to post it on the Father's Heart website, so it's available for the public to review. Moving on to the criteria, this is conditional use permit criteria that is applicable for any conditional use permit, not just specific to shelters. So our code requires that the characteristics of the site are suitable for the proposed use, considering size, shape, location, topography, existence of improvements and natural features. Staff finds that the standard is met given that the subject site already includes a shelter that is a known resource and accessible by clients of the Father's Heart. Additionally, the property is in very close proximity to transit, including the Oregon City Transit Center downtown, as well as several transit streets. This site is also within walking distance to several churches and other public amenities such as Barclay Park and the public library. Our code also requires that the proposed use does not alter the character of the surrounding area in a manner which impedes the use of properties for their primary use, which in this case would be primarily residential properties that surround the site. So the nighttime shelter is only operating approximately 11 nights a year. So the impacts to the neighborhood and neighborhood character that are associated with the nighttime use are limited because it operates so few nights. It's also been operating for the past 4 years through the emergency resolution approved by the City Commission. So neighborhood character and neighborhood conditions would remain the same as what they have been the past 4 years. We've heard a lot of concerns from neighbors about trespassing, theft, drug use, any other illegal activities that may have an impact on neighborhood character. The purpose of the nighttime shelter is to bring people indoors, which would help alleviate some of these concerns we've heard from neighbors about nuisance or illegal behavior that may be taking place in the neighborhood, since the Father's Heart provides a place for people to go inside rather than potentially engaging in any nuisance behavior. Lastly, the area and the neighborhood is served by the Oregon City Police Department, and any illegal activities that may be occurring are regulated by the police rather than as part of this land use. The next conditional use permit criteria is that the proposal satisfies goals and policies of the city's comprehensive plan. There are several goals and policies that were included in the staff report that are applicable to the proposal, including transportation, affordable housing, and efficient use of land. But the one I wanted to focus on for this presentation is livability. We've heard from a lot of neighbors about potential impacts to neighborhood livability, and neighborhood livability within the comprehensive plan applies not only to property owners and taxpayers within Oregon City, but all community members in Oregon City, including clients of the Father's Heart. The proposed shelter would advance some of these goals and policies related to livability because it provides a warm place to sleep on freezing nights for our community members that need that. But through the required community engagement plan, it also ensures that livability for neighborhood residents is maintained and provides a mechanism for residents to identify their concerns and for their concerns to be addressed to ensure that livability, neighborhood livability is maintained for those residents. The next conditional use permit criteria allows for the Planning Commission to stipulate restrictions or conditions which uphold the spirit of the zoning ordinance and mitigate any adverse effect of the proposal. We have a condition to maintain a log of nights of operation that the nighttime shelter is operating each year, and to submit that to the city, as well as to share it at the required annual community meeting. And we also have a condition of approval to post the Father's Heart Good Neighbor Agreement and the community engagement plan on the Father's Heart website, since we've heard a lot of concerns that those documents aren't publicly available. Katie, do you mind clicking through? Okay, and the last conditional use permit criteria that I wanted to address is building openings. The Planning Commission can limit or restrict building openings within 50 feet of a residential property in a residential zone. So there is one building entrance, which is the rear entrance, which faces the parking lot. That is approximately 42 feet from the adjacent residential property line. Along that property line, that property is separated from the entrance by an existing chain link fence, as well as an existing cedar fence and some landscaping. The actual house on the property is approximately 80 feet from the entrance. So for those reasons, we're not recommending any additional limitations or restrictions for that building opening. And then lastly, I just wanted to address some of the public comments that we've received, or some of the themes that we've seen in those public comments that I didn't already address with the conditional use permit criteria. We've heard several concerns about the building occupancy and the number of clients that are allowed within the nighttime warming shelter. The shelter is subject to the joint temporary shelter policy between the building division and Clackamas Fire District. And we also have a condition of approval to comply with any required permits or inspections from those agencies. And the Father's Heart has done that with their prior emergency resolutions that have allowed them to operate. So they go through that review with those agencies every year. We've also heard a lot of concerns about clients of the Father's Heart being in the neighborhood outside of the hours of operation. Again, the purpose of the application is to provide indoor space for community members on freezing nights, taking people off the street. But that being said, public space, including parks, streets, and sidewalks, is available for all members of the public. And when the shelter is closed, or even when it's open, clients of the Father's Heart are free to be in any public space, as is anyone else. That being said, any illegal activity that is occurring, again, is regulated by the police department. And then lastly, we received some comments about the services that are offered by the Father's Heart and whether or not they're adequate. The zoning code doesn't require or regulate what services are provided. They are free to, provide any services within their capacity. We did receive some additional comments that we're adding to the record after the Planning Commission agenda went out last week. All of these additional comments were emailed to the Planning Commission earlier today. And with that, we're recommending approval with conditions of planning file GLUA 2119, CU 2102. And I'm happy to answer any questions, but before I do, last time we had a question about some additional state legislation for shelters that was recently adopted. So I'll hand it over to the city attorney to explain that.
Thank you. So at the last meeting, Commissioner Stoll asked me a question about whether or not there had been any legislation regarding shelters. So we did some research, and indeed, House Bill 2006 was passed into law by the governor in May of 2021, so after this application was filed. House Bill 2006 provides for sort of a super siting of emergency shelters. And what it says is that local governments are prohibited from requiring robust land use review in cases where a shelter proposal includes certain prerequisites. For example, it's inside the urban growth boundary. It's being provided by a particular type of shelter provider. It is has a certain transportation connection. It has bathrooms and appropriate sanitary. So there's a list of prerequisites. When those prerequisites are met, a city must approve an application, and that approval happens without notice, and it happens without an opportunity to be heard. It's the equivalent of a sort of type 1 review. The city does process clear and objective applications through a type 1 process where there is no notice and a decision is made, and that if someone is adversely affected or aggrieved by that decision, they have a remedy in circuit court, not the Land Use Board of Appeals, which is the ordinary course for type 2 and type 3 land use decisions that come before the Planning Commission. So that bill is now law, and that is a alternative path that is separate and distinct from the conditional use application that is before you. The city has an obligation to continue processing the conditional use permit that is before it until such time as that changes, if it changes or not. So that is a separate course, and we are proceeding to review a conditional use permit subject to the conditional use criteria that Diliana just talked about. I'm happy to respond to any questions about that, but again, it's a separate process that's not before the Planning Commission, and it's never going to be before the Planning Commission. I also wanted to just recap that Fair Housing Act and Americans with Disabilities Act provides that the city cannot take personal circumstances of residents into account when making a decision. This is a review of a use subject to criteria related to temporary warming shelter night, average 11 nights a year. So the day use activity is sort of off the table, so I'm asking you to sort of keep blinders on about the narrow scope of this. Whether or not this shelter is a good idea or good policy with respect to solving the homelessness crisis, or if there were a better approach, that is again outside the scope of this review. This location is off the table. This is a zone where a shelter is a conditional use allowed in the zone. So, happy to answer any other questions. Vasileva is too. Commissioner, I don't care. It's not mine to call on you. It's, sorry. Go ahead.
For the benefit of everyone here, since this is a type 4
Correct.
application, can you explain next steps?
Sure.
After whatever, if we make a decision tonight, what happens next? And
Sure.
how would that hearing be conducted?
Sure. If the planning commission recommends approval, it is a recommendation to the city commission. It is not the final decision. So it is if it is an approval, it is a recommendation to city commission, and city commission will have a hearing in September, I suspect. I don't know yet.
Date to be determined.
Date to be determined. If the planning commission were to deny the application, the only way the city commission would hear it is if it were appealed. So it's not equal on both sides. So if it's an approval from the planning commission, it is a recommendation to the city commission will review it. The denial, that will be the final stop for the application unless it is appealed.
And in either of those cases, are those I'm not going to try to do the Latin thing because I always forget which one de novo.
On the record.
Which
It's
one
not
de novo.
Latin.
It's only what's on the record, regardless
Only
of
what's on the
whether,
record.
regardless of
Either
whether it's
way.
yes or no.
Either way, it is on the record, so
So any issues that need to be brought up before the city commission need to be brought up tonight.
they do need to be brought up tonight.
Thank you. That's all I wanted to make sure was clear. Thank you.
I was wondering, so if this was denied tonight by Planning Commission, would the applicant be able to come back through the other way that you were saying with the House Bill 2006 and the governor's emergency? So would they have the other avenue to appeal this?
So I can't weigh in on what they could or could not do. There is a bill, House Bill 2006 does appear to provide an alternative path. We have an application before us that is on this path.
I understand.
Whether or not that other application would be approved, I cannot say, because we don't have an application for that before us.
Any other questions? Because I have a couple. Okay, if we were, not saying where we're going with this, if we were to deny it and then the city commission would have a say, does the path to LUBA change between approval and denial, or can both directions end up in LUBA?
Any party who participated before the city may appeal a decision to the Land Use Board of Appeals.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. All right, and then the other question I had was actually part of the staff report. It was section H2F, but there's so many section H's in here that I have no idea where it was, but it had to do with the community engagement plan and the good neighbor agreement. It sounds like it can be reviewed, for effectiveness, during certain times, but is it enforceable in any way?
Not by the city. The community engagement plan,
What if they do a terrible job at what they promised to do, and then they just don't stick to any of it? Where would that go?
Yeah, so part of the community engagement plan requires, to identify how any issues would be resolved, and that's also why our code requires an annual meeting, is to kind of revisit the issues and revisit the community engagement plan and see if it is working or if it needs to be tweaked. So it wouldn't be something the city is enforcing, it would be an agreement between the Father's Heart and the community.
And has that agreement been drafted yet?
it has been drafted, and they've provided a draft of the agreement, but we're requiring a final community engagement plan to be submitted after they hold the first community meeting, so that any changes that are made can be included in the final plan.
Okay, and is the community involved at all in the writing of it? Is it a one-sided type of a deal where they present it and that's how it's going to be, or does the community have a say in what goes into plan?
Well, the idea is that it's kind of a dialogue between the community and the
Okay.
Father's Heart, so, they can work together to come up with the final plan.
And what if they hit an impasse, say, where they can't agree? I have to ask.
The condition of approval is really about the process, not about the outcome, right? Must have a meeting, must talk about these things so often, and that's what that's what's related to the land use action.
Okay, all right. All right, any other questions? Commissioner West.
So under Chapter 1750, this could be reviewed yearly and revoked if not agreeable or to both parties, the neighborhood and Father's Heart?
So one of the conditional use permit criteria, sorry, I'm trying to find the section. Okay, so we have our code allows for revocation of conditional use permits, where the Planning Commission or City Commission may initiate administrative action to revoke any conditional use permit previously issued by the city or with regard to lands annexed by the city. So the Planning Commission may revoke any conditional use permits that are granted if one or more of the conditions attached to the conditional use permit have not been fulfilled, and if the unfulfilled condition is substantially related to the issuance of the conditional use permit. So it would be related to the conditions of approval that are attached to this staff report.
Correct, and then would that automatically come up for renewal each year, or would it only be in an instance where there was a problem that you would be looking at that?
I think it would be a situation where somebody would have to apply for that review from the Planning Commission.
As proposed, it would not come back to the Planning Commission on a yearly basis. We would treat it like every other conditional use. But if they fail to have their yearly meeting, thus not complying with the condition of approval, then the Planning Commission could certainly have the authority to take it up and revoke it.
So,
Apologize for the interruption, but folks in the audience are having a hard time hearing, so if you could please get closer to your microphones when you're speaking, that way they are able to hear you a little bit clearer. Thank you.
Okay.
Chair Schlagenhofer, this is something we need to revisit, I think, the annual review and the possible revocation, but I think it's more appropriate later on after we've heard from all parties.
yeah, agree.
Okay. All right, any more questions for staff or legal? Applicant is next. Okay, no other questions? Okay, we will now hear from the applicant. The applicant has 15 minutes. And as I said before, please state your name, city of residence, and I'm sure we have your contact information, so.
My name is Marty Gant, and I live in Estacada, Oregon. Good evening. I'm president of the Father's Heart and co-founder with my beloved Terry. The Father's Heart was founded over 20 years ago in our living room. Terry was on her knees before our God. Jesus asked her to help, to be a light to those in need. She asked, "Why me?" The response was powerful. He said he asked many, but most refused. Terry said, "Yes, I'll do it." He said he will be by our side and has never gone back on that promise. The Father's heart was birthed. It is placed here to be an advocate and be a help to those that are in need. It was my wife's desire to help the homeless and low-end communities with basic human needs: food, clean clothing, a bathroom, a friend. We share the love of Christ as demonstrated in the Word of God by being an example of Christ. We hope to transform the lives of the hurting, lonely, hopeless, and addicted people by being his hands and feet extended in love. We see the Father's heart as a safe refuge, where those struggling with homelessness can rest, shower, sleep, be served a warm meal, and be in the peaceful presence of the Lord, where they can receive the help they need and access the many resources we have. To many in the community, this is controversial. They don't see us as a light. Many want stipulations attached. You're going to hear some complain about individuals' behavior. They believe that all that come to the ministry for help are causing issues in the neighborhood, in the city, and in the county. I will never deny that some behavior is unacceptable, and we are always taking steps to resolve, fix, help. But many of the comments you will hear do not add up. The embellishments, the fake news, the unreasonable attitudes. We have served many over the years without incident. We estimate less than 5% of the current houseless population in Oregon City have been disruptive. But many of those same individuals have never stepped foot in our doors, or their services have been denied because of their behavior. We have trespassed some from the property. Because we do have boundaries and rules. We're not giving up on them, but we do have an expectation of them to be respectful within our community. It is important to know we have resources, programs, trained staff, contracts, and partner with many agencies that help in finding solutions for the houseless, and we're doing so every day. We work closely with Clackamas County Social Services, Oregon City PD, LEAD, Love One, Lifeline Detox Center, CCC Hooper Detox, Molalla Warming Center, Clackamas Service Center, Homeless Solutions Coalitions, Bridges to Change, Free on the Outside, Bybee Lakes Hope Center, Mountain View Recovery Houses, Galea Recovery Houses, Oregon Sober Living, Housing Authority of Clackamas County, DePaul Detox Center, CC Community Court, Coordinated Housing Access, Central City Concern, Clackamas Women's Services, Veterans Affairs, and more. Did you know, based on 2019 data, there was 900 households in need of shelter in Clackamas County, and 138 of those households are from Oregon City? Did you know that a very high percentage of the houseless reside in tents, in their auto, under bridges, and many other places? But most are within 20 miles of where they were from, where they once were housed, where they were raised. Did you realize the top 5 reasons that these people identify as causing homelessness are they can't afford rent, they're unemployed, they have a conflict with family or housemates, mental or emotional health issues, or been evicted? I provide this information only to say, this meeting is not about all that. This is a public forum to discuss the need of a warming center for at-risk individuals when the temperatures are cold. We have experience, we have rules, we have expectations, and yes, we're saving lives. Let me say it again, we're saving lives. We have successfully operated as a warming shelter for Clackamas County since 2009. We have a controlled, warm, safe environment, and again, we are saving lives. So my question is, if we're not granted the permit to house during the coldest days, where do they go? It's been talked about already. Their tents are uninhabitable, their cars freezing. This is where they go. They find garages, breezeways, business doorways. Some will do anything to find safety and warmth. They'll be scattered here and there and not be in a safe and warm environment. The recent hot weather and loss of life is tragic. If not prepared, the same thing will happen in your neighborhood this winter. It is my hope that you see the need, understand our capabilities, and award the permit. It is our commitment to be a positive light in the community, and we're willing to be proactive in resolving the issues that come our way. I ask that if you doubt us, come visit. See and hear what is really being accomplished at the Father's Heart. We have an open invitation to those in the community, and when they have come by for a visit, they leave with understanding and compassion and a different view of what we're doing. The word enable has been tossed around. The difference between enable and empowerment is very small. This is about human rights, human needs, and a heart of compassion. A hand up is much different than a hand out. I'm going to go off script a little bit here. I want to make sure you understand that we're good at what we do when it comes to the night shelter. No one is kept out in the cold. A question's been posed to me about when we hit capacity, what do? We work with other agencies. We know and work with those agencies within our community so that we can house the homeless. And there is the same issue for them. When they get capacity, they've come to us. The argument of how we operate is not going to be resolved tonight. But I encourage you to join us in helping the many and being active in finding the solutions we all want. In closing, for those that are willing, close your eyes for just a moment. It's winter, it's cold, it's bitter cold, and the at-risk come to our doors for help. They're wet, freezing, shivering, and afraid. Many of you know them. They're a brother, a sister, a mom, a dad, or a friend. Down on their luck and no resources, nowhere to go. But our doors are locked. The mats are put away, the coffee pot is off, the heat is on low, because no one's answering the door. They are turned away. With your own vision, with your own imagination, can you understand how they're feeling? This is not a made-up scenario, it's real. I say to you this evening, be blessed. And when you go home, take a moment. Look around and be grateful. May the peace of the Almighty be with you. Any questions?
All right, thank you very much. Any questions from the commissioners?
I have one.
Okay, Commissioner West?
When reading through your application, you talked about the criteria for the selection of your guests, and I was wondering what your criteria is. I'll just ask a bunch here. And then you've mentioned tonight your rules for the shelter. So what are your rules for the shelter?
Well, the rules are lengthy, and I don't have that list today, but we have those rules, and they're even posted, and every client that comes in understands them. We go through them with them. So I apologize, I don't have that list with me. But behavior is a huge part of it, and so I can't really answer that without a little bit of due diligence, but I could get you that information.
Another thing I was reading in the Clackamas Fire report, and they were talking about that someone needs to be there within a minute's reach of the phone or have a cell phone. So what is the time allowance that you consider acceptable to answer a phone if somebody needs to, if there's a problem in the neighborhood?
Well, if we're there at night, we have people up all night, so the phone's there.
And the phone is always answered?
Always answered.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Commissioner Mitchell?
Yeah, I've got 3 questions. Can you explain that 10 p.m. curfew?
Well, what we try and do is we have lights out at 10 o'clock. So that's the point of a 10 p.m. curfew. Now, do we hold to that? Not really, because if somebody comes at 11 and it's cold, we're going to find them a bed. If we don't have a bed, we find them a bed somewhere else. So the point is to give the homeless some guidelines as to being prompt and being there. And some of them want to be there because they want to sleep in our building, so they get there in time. So the point I make is lights out at 10 o'clock. Lights come back on at 6. And then they're out at 7. So that's the point of the 10 p.m. curfew.
And if someone wants to leave 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning?
We can't deny them leaving. That's not That's not within our capabilities.
Sure, understood, okay. And how do your clients or potential clients know that you're going to be open on a particular
We
evening?
have many, because we're contracted with the county, we have many ways, but mostly through 211 and an email that's posted. So there's an email of a list of people, a litany of people. There's probably 8-10 people that we send an email to that says we're going to be open. And we make that decision by noon of the day in question.
Okay.
And it's based on the criteria of weather report for NOAA at the time.
And last question, what authority or control do you have over a client once they leave your property?
I have no control over a client when they leave my property any more than you do. I mean, that's impossible for me to have that control.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else? Anything else for the applicant? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'll need help from the staff on this. We give 5 minutes to a representative of a recognized neighborhood association. I don't know if they're in this stack of comment forms. So who do we have?
I don't know that we have a representative
Okay,
of a neighborhood
all right. Do
association
we have a
that I'm
member
aware of.
of a neighborhood association here that would like to speak? Or would you like to wait until your turn?
I don't really want to hear from them about the
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, so we have quite a few comments, and we'll give 3 minutes to each person. We have a timer, and I ask that you watch your time, and then at 3 minutes to cut it off, because I'm terrible at cutting people off. I don't like to do it, but in an effort to hear everybody tonight, I just ask that you watch that 3-minute timer. And then I'll call 2 people up at a time. You'll speak in the order I'll call them, but that might help a little bit with getting people up here and then back out. So I'm going to start with the first 2. I'm going to do these as good as I can in the order they were requested and in the order I received them. The first one is going to be Dan Fowler, and right after that, Jessica Murray.
And please state your name and city of residence, and if you would like a copy of the notice of decision at the end, provide your address, or you can provide it to city staff after.
Is Jessica Murray up here? You can sit there, or yeah, you'll be right after him.
Can I take this mask off, please? Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. Dan Fowler, City of Residence is West Lynn, soon to be Oregon City. My comments are fairly simple. I believe that this hearing is about a warming shelter, not whether Father's Heart should be in that location. And I believe they've met the criteria for that shelter. And I would encourage you to approve the application. What I've discovered is that if we truly want to help the homeless, and I might add that I do have, my office is the closest office building to the Father's Heart. I own the Abernathy Center, which is a very close business to the Father's Heart, as well as Corner 14. I sit as chairman of the Homeless Solutions Coalition of Clackamas County, and I am one of 5 Clackamas County's representative to the Supportive Housing Solutions Coalition for the region. I've been knee-deep in the homeless issue for about 5 years now, and just as a private citizen and businessman. I'm really motivated to really try to help solutions happen. And I know this isn't popular. Many of these people in my neighborhood are my friends. I know them, and thank goodness we live in America. I take the long view, and the long view on a warming shelter is this, in my humble opinion. If we're truly wanting the homeless out of our neighborhood, we have to know them. By knowing them, we can discover what they truly need to transition. If we don't know them, it just perpetuates. So having a warming shelter is a way of knowing the need of the person, and that can then be addressed. I'll give you an example. The shower cart that was just in our community, and it was quite controversial in the beginning, and it was located up at the Milne Veterinary Clinic. In 3 months, that shower cart has relocated and found temporary housing for 40 homeless individuals. That would have never happened had there not been a place for those individuals to actually go to and shower. It's a parallel, in my opinion, as a warming shelter can do. So I'll stop at that. That's really my thrust of my testimony is to, I'll say one other thing, and this is a view down the road. I hope that this city will pass an emergency ordinance that allows warming shelters and cooling centers to happen by nonprofits and churches, similar to what Milwaukee has passed. The reason being, there are churches and nonprofits in the area that are willing to help in times of need when temperatures are so cold or so hot, and they're not allowed to. Homeless people will go to the nearest center, and so if that were allowed, not everyone in the community would feel like they got to go to Father's Heart, but they would have their needs met in a various number of places. I know my time's up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fowler. Okay, Mrs. Murray.
Hi. Okay. Planning Commission, I know that many of you are struggling with this decision. It is very complex. It is. And I know we're talking about, oh, it's only 11 nights, it's a few nights. It is bigger than that, I think. The applicant has talked about some of us embellishing or over-exaggerating. I am not embellishing. You have seen my house. It faces the Father's Heart. It may not be within the amount of feet, but we are on stage. So when people are lining up in order to get into the shelter, and for the evening shelter, as mentioned, they show up early. They are lined up on 12th Street looking at my house. No one is saying that all of the guests here are bad people or that all of them are committing these things. But even that percentage is still important, and there's still an impact on our neighborhood. The applicant in their response talked about one person whipping everybody in the neighborhood up. I'm not sure if they were referring to me. I'm not whipping anyone up. This is how I have felt for 9 years living directly across the street. In talking with my neighbors, I found out that there was all of this other impact and all of these things happening, and that people had strong feelings and concerns, valid concerns, and that really we just needed to be able to come together. And me asking our community to come together and be able to be here together is not any different than the Father's Heart sending out a letter on their letterhead asking for their volunteers to be here and speak in behalf of them. We have every right to do that and to combine together and to share our stories. I know that the staff has recommended that you approve. I encourage you to make the decision for yourself and not just to follow the staff report. To weigh the really deeply good intentions of the Father's Heart with the impacts on the surrounding neighbors. I absolutely am not opposed to them or what they are doing or their mission. I understand completely that it is important. I do believe that the questions about the suitability of this location is actually part of the criteria about how close our houses are and the impacts. Yeah, they come in and they can come in at any time of night, but they're lined up beforehand and they're released into the neighborhood at 7 a.m. I ask the Father's Heart, have you looked at finding another more suitable location? Because I will absolutely support you if you do. It is about weighing their good intentions, and I get it, life-saving measures, but also with the impact of the neighborhood, on the people that they are bringing into the neighborhood. And for those nighttime shelters, the 4 nights, there are people coming and going all night long. My porch views the entire thing. There are people in the neighborhood smoking, talking, coming and going. We can hear them from inside our house. And I realize you might weigh and go, well, one neighbor can't sleep, we're saving lives. I ask you to weigh and really listen to what everybody is saying and weigh the impacts of the neighborhood. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Murray. I need to back up a second. We had a list of speakers at 5:15 p.m., but I don't know, we never got a comment card from them. Should I call them?
We did get comment cards from those speakers on the list that I gave you. They were just submitted electronically before this hearing.
They're not here to speak.
I don't know. I believe that they are if they submitted testimony cards.
All right, since they submitted them earlier, should I call them now?
You can.
Okay, all right. I like to do that since they planned ahead. I don't want to punish people that plan ahead. Mr. Kevin Dahlgren and Miss Mary Graham. Yeah, you can sit there, and you are first, Mr. Dahlgren. I need your name and city of residence.
My name is Kevin Dahlgren. I live in Portland, Oregon.
Okay, thank you.
You're probably wondering what I'm doing here.
You never know.
Thank you, commissioners. Again, my name is Kevin Dahlgren. I've been a homeless consultant for the City of Oregon City and Oregon City PD for almost 2 years. And I've worked very closely with Father's Heart and other social service agencies. Background-wise, I've worked with the homeless, houseless population for about 20 years. I'm here in support of Father's Heart opening a winter warming shelter. I've had significant contact with this agency, and over the last 2 years, working with them, we have housed approximately 150 individuals, which is my responsibility in Oregon City, is to work on the case management piece. Anyone who's ready to accept help, our number one goal is to find a permanent solution as fast as possible. The reason why that number seems really high is because the homeless oftentimes are transient and will come from Portland to Oregon City to Gresham to Sandy. It's just the way it is. And so I get calls almost every day from Oregon City asking for assistance with someone brand new in our community, this community. And my focus is to then help the individual working with Father's Heart and other agencies and just find a permanent solution, which is the way I roll with the other job I have, is just focus on the permanent solutions. I also believe we are here to empower, not enable. So I believe strongly in accountability. I believe strongly in rules, policy, ordinances, but also I lead with compassion, because these are our most vulnerable citizens. And I understand any warming shelter is not going to be perfect. I have managed multiple in my career, but again, that's what rules are for. And I applaud everyone being here, voicing an opinion, because that's the way a community is supposed to work. So I love that, and I just appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mrs. Graham.
My name is Mary Robles. It used to be Mary Graham, unless there's another Mary Graham in the building. I own my own home in Vancouver, Washington. And I say that because I'm a product of Father's Heart. So I wrote, "Good evening. I want to start this speech to you all with a thank you. Thank you for giving some time out of your day to listen to my story." Short version, of course. Terry Gant, the founder of Father's Heart Ministry, was my spiritual advisor. And she always told me, "Mary, you get more with honey than you do vinegar." So I practice her words today, every time I get a chance. I was a homeowner, and I worked for the state of Oregon Vocational Rehabilitation. The man I married had made some wrong choices in his life, which ended up affecting mine. The consequences that he suffered from his choices was the death by the Clackamas County Sheriff. I believe after the said event, I think I was in a state of shock that probably lasted about 5 years. I couldn't believe it. He was gone. So through the pain in my heart and the emotional and mental issues that I found myself suffering from, I found something that took it all away. If only for a couple hours. It was cocaine. I soon became addicted and had to have more and more to make the pain go away. I guess I believed that if I didn't face it, it didn't really happen. Moving forward, I soon learned after I lost my house, my job, and my self-dignity, I wasn't a good thief and I wasn't a good prostitute. So I picked up cans and bottles to feed my habit. I met some other homeless people and I hung out with this guy named Pete. I felt safe with him against whatever was out there in the dark. He took me to Father's Heart. We were able to eat food, take a shower, get clean clothes, and most importantly, we were treated like human beings who mattered to somebody when I had lost all hope in mankind. I tell you this story because we don't know others' pain and how it all came about, but it's not always the person's doing. A lot of it is their reaction to the pain and their way they coped with it. To help a person find their way back is to show some kindness, a bottle of water, a meal, a pair of socks, something that shows that they matter, a night shelter, right? Today, I can tell you that I went to college and I am a drug and alcohol counselor for Ridgefield, Washington Treatment Center. I am also a case manager for Central City Concerns, Housed Rapid Response, that is funded by the Portland Police. If you would have told me back then I'd be working with the police, I wouldn't believe you. I am the executive director to Morningstar Recovery Houses. I have 4 of them, 2 in Clackamas and 2 in Multnomah. The label that I like the best is Child of God.
I'm sorry, Mary, do you have like a 10-second wrap-up possible?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Give back, which was so freely given to me, is the love. Please join me in this journey. Please support the Father's Heart Ministry and their journey to support the lost and the wounded.
Thank you. And I wish we had more time for everybody. Mary, I do have a question. I got a Mary Graham here, but you said your name changed. Is it also Mary Robles?
Robles, yeah. I got married.
Okay, so I don't need to call you because okay. Thank you. I'm just trying to sort this out. Okay. Thank you. Mrs. Allison Famous. I hope that's right.
Yeah, I'm here on Zoom.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I've prepared something in writing, so I keep my focus. It's Allison Foster. My maiden name was Famous. And I live in the Willamette part of West Lynn. If this meeting had taken place 4 years ago, I would have been standing with the Father's Heart, as I have been a passionate homeless advocate for almost 20 years. I'd like to tell you why this has changed. In 2017, I volunteered in a clothing closet and as a shower attendant. With Terry's blessing, I had started a Bible study. My goal was to create a safe space to look to Scripture while building community and discipleship. I wanted to help facilitate healing and wholeness that would lead to freedom from addiction, reconciliation with family, and steps being taken towards self-sufficiency. Around the same time, I began helping an elderly gentleman with his coffee shop at the Oregon City Transit Center. I began seeing many of the Father's Heart guests outside of the shelter setting, and my eyes were open to the reality of most of their lifestyles. I observed drug deals, aggressive panhandling, and was once even chased onto a TriMet bus after refusing to give someone cash. Unfortunately, there is a pronounced sense of entitlement with this population. I just recently unfriended and blocked a Father's Heart guest that sent me a video over Facebook Messenger of his hotel exploit with a prostitute. To this day, I still consider some of them to be friends. Most, however, I would typify as opportunists who have no intention of living a life outside of living off the misguided generosity of others. Observation on social media reveals days spent doing little outside of playing video games and partying. Most are going to the Father's Heart for a meal, shower, and nap, and then going back to an unproductive, even criminal lifestyle. Another man that we tried to help, my husband and I, with safe boundaries, by the way, and he never had access to my home or my daughter. We helped to try and find him work. He'd done 14 years for a violent sex crime, but he ended up texting me with a barrage of such profanity that I had to block him as well after we refused to give him cash. The fact is that although the Father's Heart is hosting some harmless, mainly mentally ill people, they are also enabling some dangerous ones who likely are responsible for the neighborhood mischief. My point is that not only are the vulnerable not really being helped, the decent people of this neighborhood are suffering. What began as a beautiful vision of mercy has not only proven to be ineffective and unsustainable, it is causing active damage to people who are simply trying to raise their kids, pay their taxes, and live productive lives. I strongly recommend that the Father's Heart be prohibited from becoming even more of a fixture in this residential area and relocate with a more structured vision in an area where collateral damage can be avoided. Please consider what you would tolerate for your own children and do right by these people. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Famous. All right, Mr. Richard Kaiser and Mr. Clint Nicholson. And in that order, please. Mr. Kaiser will be first, and then Mr. Nicholson. State your name and city of residence.
Richard Kaiser, Oregon City resident. I heard a lot tonight, both on both sides of the argument and the CUP application. And a lot of what I want to say has already been said. So I'm just really going to focus on location, topography. I live next door to the Father's Heart, 1206 Washington Street, and I'm kind of like early retirement, so I'm there all day long, and I see everything all day. Most people I don't see. So far, I've seen I call him the defecating bandit, because he literally defecates in broad daylight in my driveway on the shared space. I've called Father's Heart a couple times about it, and they've dealt with it, but it keeps kind of happening, which makes me not have faith in the Father's Heart when they're trying to enforce their policies, because not all their clients are bad. I'm not saying they are, but let's be real. There's probably a couple there every day that aren't there for the right intentions, and they do have a negative impact on my community. I've called law enforcement twice, or 3-4 times now, just sound issues at nighttime. I don't oppose what their purpose is and what they do. I just hope they can increase their enforcement of their actual clients, find new ways to keep the community free and clear of, these bad apples in the community. Maybe they'll be more welcomed by then if they show that they are, being productive and engaging with us. But the fact that, as the founder said, once they leave their property, they have no responsibility or accountability for their actions. That just shows a lot of, too many variables, too many unanswered questions in the air. And by bringing more in at nighttime with no security whatsoever, it's just inviting more problems, even if it's for 11 days or 12 days or 5 days. When they're in operation, there's issues throughout the whole day that I see and night. Oddly enough, when they're closed for business, it's peaceful, but it's just only when they're open, the crowds start coming in. Folks I don't see around here ever, they start showing up. It's just, I think it's just unsafe operation. If they could just tighten up their, who they're helping, maybe do better background checks on them, and really, filter out the folks that actually are there for their help and not just taking advantage of their system. That's all I gotta say.
Thank you, Richard. Okay. Clint Nicholson.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name's Clint Nicholson. I am a resident of Oregon City, live at 1114 Washington Street, directly across the street from the shelter. I'm in strong opposition to the conditional use permit. This is the first time we, the neighborhood, have felt there was an opportunity to air our grievances, genuine safety concerns, and the lack of community engagement by the shelter. Today they have operated mostly in silence as far as the neighborhood is concerned. I had some different comments to make earlier today, but I wanted to make some reference to, in response to Exhibit 4, the applicant's response to public comments received. Given all the concerns of the neighborhood, I wanted to make reference to the management of the shelter stated that they were willing to talk with neighbors, but however putting the onus on neighbors to contact the shelter directly. Clearly the shelter is the focus of these concerns by many neighbors. I'm not normally comfortable approaching the shelter during operating hours to discuss this, given our proximity. There are neighbours that have not issued any formal opposition to this permit application. I'm not sure why, but I believe there's some concerns about repercussions in the area. Safety is a concern on all our minds for many reasons, directly in the neighbourhood, mostly associated with the shelter. I also wanted to call to attention the 10th bullet point in that Exhibit 4 regarding most neighbours' concerns are about day use. I refute that and would like to advise that the significant majority of concerns fall outside the operating hours of the shelter. I also refute the comment that concerns are not factual, are embellished, scripted, and fear motivated. This comes from someone who lives directly across the street in Oregon City, not outside the city limits. The applicant's response assumes some of the conditional use permit standards do not apply because their building is existing. However, the application is for a conditional use permit. This use is not permitted outright. The full use of the surrounding areas, properties, I should say, have been impaired by recidivist trespassing from clients using the shelter. I want to reiterate I'm in opposition to the conditional use permit, and thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholson. Okay, next to Sharon Nicholson and Colin Murray.
Can I start? I think she went to get him.
I'm sorry, what?
May I begin?
Yes, but please state your name and city of residence.
Hi, I'm Sharon Nicholson. I live on, I'm in Oregon City, and I live on Washington Street right across from the shelter. I have a written statement, but I really wanted to applaud the work that the Father's Heart does. And I think it's very difficult, and it has been a difficult conversation for all of the neighbors, because we feel that the work that Father's Heart is doing, you can't really oppose it. You can't oppose the need for a night shelter. You can't oppose the need for a shelter at all. And there's been some really compelling conversations. And so it's very difficult to come up against the great work that's being done. But unfortunately, this is the first opportunity that the neighborhood has had to respond to anything related to the shelter. Back in 2012, I believe it was just, they just approved it. There was no formal approval. And then in 2016, there was no input from anybody, not from the neighborhood association or anybody in the neighborhood. And we moved into the neighborhood in 2016, and I believe that's when the shelter got its official permit. So So now we have an opportunity because of this conditional use to come before you. And while it's been stated, the use of the shelter during the day is not in discussion. The fact that there's a need for the shelter is not in dispute, but the impact that it's having on the neighborhood is significant. And in the response from the staff about the livability, that the shelter is providing livability for those people in dire need, and no one is in dispute of that, but it is at the cost to us in the neighborhood. So where do you weigh it? And it's hard to say, I have a home, I have shelter. How am I going to stand up against someone who has nothing and is in dire need and may die? It's very difficult, but the reality is that shelter should never have been approved. And now we're here today. We probably wouldn't be here today if it had gone through the correct process. So I know it's not in dispute and not part of the discussion, but we can't not face the fact that it is not in the right location. And as a result, the people from all around the area are coming to the shelter. They don't always know what day of the week it is. They don't know if it's open or closed. They don't know how cold it is. They don't know what time it is, but they know they need something. And I don't blame them for coming up to us to ask for help. And when we can, and I know Jessica has provided help, I know a lot of our neighbors have, but it's not comfortable. And I think what we need to do is really look at, if we approve this night shelter, we are entering into more expansion of the Father's heart, and that's our concern. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nicholson. Okay, Colin Murray. And then you'll be first, but can we also have Amy Etta come up and prepare? Okay, go ahead, Colin.
Thank you. My name is Colin Murray. I live at 612 12th Street, which is right across from the property in question. I appreciate the opportunity to speak here. I wanted to look at a fairly specific aspect of the issue that we're currently discussing. You represent a city of a relatively substantial size, not huge, but not tiny. So I'm sure that the pressure to approve this request may be coming from a variety of sources. I hope that you will listen to the people who will be directly affected and who have been affected over the course of the last several years in this neighborhood. The immediate neighbors of the Father's Heart have all expressed their concerns how this organization has run their day-to-day operations. We know from experience that the warming shelter will not be any different. We've had the warming shelter in our neighborhood for the last couple of years. Most of the staff report responses to the issues raised in the first committee meeting reference the rights of the household's population. I would like to make it very clear that we support those rights and we want that community to be well served. The issue that is of paramount concern to my family is the inability of the Father's Heart to address the concerns of their immediate neighbors, us. If there was any interest in beginning this conversation, then why has there never been a community meeting like the staff report recommends? They've been operating for years with emergency approvals, and they have never attempted to meet with surrounding community. I was under the impression that the rules for shelters required a meeting before commencing operation, which would mean that they have been out of compliance for almost a decade. What makes you think that they will do so in good faith in the future? I urge you to listen to the voices of the people that you represent that are directly affected by this well-intended but mismanaged community resource. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Is Amy Etta here? I don't know. It looks like it could be Amy E. Ha. Okay, all right, I'm sorry about that. Okay, how about Monica Wright coming up too? Thank you. Okay, you are up, Amy, and
Yes.
just your Name and city of residence.
Yes, my name is Amy Ha. I live on Jefferson Street in the McLaughlin district. So I've been a homeowner for 17 years in the McLaughlin district. I'm a mother, I'm a business owner, I'm active in the community. My family has been directly affected for 4 years in terms of the emergency shelters from the Father's Heart's guests. Our safety is jeopardized, our kids live in fear in the neighborhood. My family is not fake news. We don't live, our family is not fake news. So in regards to Oregon City Police Department, which is a recurring statement, 34 police officers are currently employed by the Oregon City Police Department. The current most recent population of Oregon City residents, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, is 37,339. Breaking this down, each officer is responsible for 1,098 citizens. I want you to think about this. These are registered active community members, parents, tax-paying citizens that are depending and relying on these officers. This is an underpaid, overwhelmed, and understaffed police department that is responsible for these citizens. Our officers are not mental health providers. They are not substance abuse counselors. They are not trained in providing services that the homeless population needs or requires or deserves. The Father's Heart has yet to prove that they are equipped and certified to provide these services for their day use, let alone for their emergency use that they are requesting. What happens when there is a mental health emergency or a substance abuse issue and they are unequipped to handle this? They call the Oregon City Police Department, the same department that is understaffed and serving the community during an emergency, such as the recent ice storm that occurred on February 12th through February 15th. This is the same organization that the Father Heart tells us continuously to call, not to call their professionals. I want to address the good neighbor policy that the Father Heart claims to have, but has never addressed this within the actual neighborhood. It has been communicated that this exists, but since the Father Heart has been in operation, the neighbors have yet to hear or see a physical copy of this. No email, no flyer, no phone call. As a resident, as a mother, I feel as if my concerns, my questions, my feelings are not important. The Father's Heart current capacity is 49. In regards to the conditional use with number 4, and in regards to the current COVID guidelines, I'm concerned because state mandates are changing. COVID rates are rising. They are increasing. What happens when individuals that seek these overnight services are turned away? Where do the individuals that aren't allowed to come in due to capacity and due to these COVID mandates, where do they go? Can the Father's Heart ensure that these individuals turned away are not a way that don't impact the neighborhood and its integrity or its safety? I've addressed these concerns with the Father's Heart multiple times throughout the 9 years that they've been in operation. And where and what they do with the individuals that leave this facility. How is this honoring or respecting the good neighbor policy that the Father's Heart exclaims they possess? We empathize with the homeless and the current situation in every city, town, and neighborhood that no one is benefiting from this. We urge you to listen to the neighbors, to listen to their complaints and their concerns. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amy. Monica Wright.
I'm Monica Wright, and I live on Jefferson Street in Oregon City. I have lived there since 2005. It's approximately 2.5 blocks away from the Father's Heart. And because of where the sidewalks are, there's heavy foot traffic from the Father's Heart in front of my house. I have serious concerns with the location. One of the conditions for the permit requires that the use not alter the character of the surrounding area in a manner that substantially limits, impairs, or precludes the use of the surrounding properties for the primary uses listed in the underlying district. The Father's Heart does not meet these criteria. They should be looking to relocate, not expand services at this location. Approving a night warming shelter continues to alter the character of our neighborhood further. I have actually contacted the Father's Heart with specific and actionable concerns on multiple occasions, and despite the fact that they have a accountability process in place, they have always told me that they cannot be responsible for the behavior of their clients after they leave our property, which then, like, how does an accountability process work if you don't even want to listen to my concern? And then the other time they told me that it wasn't them, but I saw it with my own 2 eyes, and so, the lawless and unneighborly behavior of some of their clients has gone unchecked for 9 years. I have called the police on multiple occasions, and they tell me that there's nothing that they can do because the person has walked on or whatever. We have been stolen from, had intravenous drug paraphernalia left on the sidewalk, had someone go to the bathroom in the yard in front of me. I had someone living in the bushes across the street and dumping stolen mail there. Me and my children have repeatedly been verbally harassed and threatened on the walk to the bus stop and when playing outside our driveway by someone who follows us screaming obscenities. The police told me he was a client of the Father's Heart. This is between the time when the night warming shelter closes and the day use shelter opens. So those hours when they leave. The shelter is directly next to single family homes on two sides and a park on the other. There are no other services available in our residential neighborhood. TriMet is not uniquely accessible at this location. There are many other more suitable locations in non-residential areas that have better access to transit and services. I think it is telling that the employees, volunteers, and individuals who support the Father's Heart being granted this conditional use permit live nowhere near the shelter. The Father's Heart does not meet the conditions for the approval of this permit. They do alter the character of the surrounding area and have a huge impact on the neighborhood. As a neighbor, they are dismissive and unresponsive when approached with issues. I ask that you please.
Thank you, Monica. Is it possible for the speakers to take their masks off when they speak, just so it's more clear, if they would be more comfortable to do that? Okay, should we leave it up to them? Okay. All right. I have a comment card with no name. I have an address.
The email address is sitegardenGroup@gmail.com.
Okay, all right. So I'll need your name, and then we have Amanda Allwine. So up to you. If you want to take your mask off, you're free to do so, just to help us hear you better.
Oh, that helps. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I live about a block away from Barclay Park. I'm a single father of a 7-year-old, and I recently purchased a house about 2 years ago in the area. It is my first home purchase, and I felt the need to come to the community here today to speak because of the close-knit community that I found here. I grew up in a town of 800 people, Sisters, Oregon, and it does feel quite a bit the same to that. I've lived throughout Portland, St. John's, throughout Southeast, and I guess my concern for this particular situation is, once the nighttime activities opened up, I have concern that the floodgates can open up, and what we have now as far as a pretty family and kid-rich community is then affected by what inevitably could, open up the floodgates, like I said, to the nighttime activity and the resources that become available to the area. Barclay Park is right there, and I walk my dog there. I'm there playing Frisbee with my kid every day, and I have concern that it would, start to become, could change. There's a lot of teenagers, a lot of kids there. I think it could potentially change the progress that has become the community as well. I live right across from La Tourette Park, right in that area, and recently La Tourette Park's opened up, and it's been wonderful because it's been a rich, new, young atmosphere. There's basketball games being played till 10 at night. And like I said, right now I'm at a place where I can have my kid be involved with the neighbors. He can run down and have dinner or play. They're out in the street. There's herds of kids running around the neighborhood, and I don't want that to change. Where his mother lives, there is a bit of a homeless area, and he's expressed to me how important and how rich he feels in being able to be in the community and walk down the street without me having to walk down with him. He's not allowed to do that where his mom lives. So I I just ask that that's taken in a note into consideration when allowing for nighttime activity at the Father's Heart. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Amanda.
Excuse me. Hello, my name is Amanda Allwine, and I live at 1102 Jefferson Street, which is about 2 blocks away from the Father's Heart. I've lived there since 2015. Before I have comments to read from many neighbors. We did ask we have actually an informal survey that was, a petition opposing the permit. It was filled out by over 120 Oregon City residents, and many did write comments, so I do have their comments. But before I read those, I just really want to be clear that this is a hard thing to do, because I believe that the Father's Heart is doing good things, and I actually even donate money to them. But I really do feel like their current location is impacting the neighborhood and also downtown. But if this is approved, I do look forward to being involved with that community plan and being provided 24-hour contact information, because there have been multiple times that I have tried to reach the Father's Heart during their closed hours and not been able to get help for people who needed it. So that's something that I would look forward to if this continues. I have a comment from Kathleen Schaff, who lives 2 blocks away from the Father's Heart. She says, currently the Father's Heart doesn't seem to have a handle on their day use facility, let alone provide an overnight shelter. Furthermore, they moved into our neighborhood in 2012 under the radar and are trying to do the same with the shelter permit. They've not once engaged any of us, their neighbors, to introduce themselves or offer transparency or conversation about their presence or plans in our community. Maybe if they actually canvassed their neighborhood, they would hear firsthand our negative experiences since they moved in and offer suggestions and solutions instead of hiding and attempting to slide things through without considering the impact on our home safety and children. We've tried engaging them when incidents occur to no avail. We've had to resort to calling code enforcement and police. This isn't acceptable, and we oppose the use of this facility as a shelter. It's not an appropriate space. It should be relocated to a business area that can offer mental health support, job resources, and healthcare. This comment is from Emily Fukuda, who lives near 7-Eleven in the McLaughlin House. She says, the influx of homeless due to Father's Heart has made our neighborhood increasingly unsafe, particularly while trying to raise my 3 small children. They are constantly hanging out all day across from our house at the McLaughlin House. They leave needles and trash in our yard and sleep behind our fence in the 7-Eleven parking lot and in the tunnel under the stairs. They've yelled at us and attempted to steal from us. Please move them away from the neighborhood. Jeanette White, who lives 3 blocks away, please realize that our residential area is important to us and should be an area where we feel safe and secure, and there should be a better place to house the homeless. John and Kitty Owens, who live 4 blocks away, say, Dear Planning Commission, we have one little piece of old Oregon City left, and this will make it unlivable. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Amanda. Okay, Jay Pierce and Terry Papino. Or Papino.
There you go.
Thank you. Okay, Jay first, state your name, city residence.
My name is Jay Pierce. I live in Oregon City at 1214 Washington Street. I live next door to the Father's Heart, but my property abuts the Father's Heart. I moved in the year they were established. There is a difference between doing good and doing the right thing from a planning perspective. You've heard here a lot of comment, and you will hear a lot of comment about the unintended consequences that radiate far from the current location of Father's Heart. As you stated, that's a separate matter. We're talking about this night warming shelter. I had a formal statement that I submitted at the previous public hearing as to the section 1, 2, 4, and 5 of the code and the infractions that I believe have occurred related to those sections of the code relating to Father's Heart. There are direct negative impacts to the neighborhood based on, ironically, the exclusion policy. They intend to call it a good neighbor policy. It's really an exclusion policy, who they will not serve. Not one of the staff of Father's Heart, and I don't believe many of the volunteers, live anywhere in the neighborhood, much less the neighborhood. I don't think they live in Oregon City. As a matter of fact, I know most don't. I'm not questioning the motives of the people at the Father's Heart. I knew Terry Gant quite well before she passed. I'm next door. I worked with her. I appreciate the do good works attitude of this property, but I believe that they are untrained to deal with the magnitude of the issues that are presented to them every day and the neighborhood every day. I've been directly involved for 5 years to try to find solutions. I too am on the board of the Homeless Solutions Coalition of Clackamas County, formerly Oregon City Homeless Solutions Coalition. There are other robustly developed providers in the faith community, county services, nonprofits, to name a few, where the TFH can apply the mission passion that they have to find temporary housing, as many of those agencies were cited by Mr. Gant in his presentation. There's a ton of them out there, and we're trying to provide consolidation and amplification of those services, but consolidation is a big issue. These people are not adequately trained or staffed to manage the expanded service that you're being asked to pass judgment on here. So please deny this application, put a permitted use process review in place to examine MUC 1, the current zoning, which exemption for that was determined without public process. No notification or meetings, as has been stated, have been occurring then or now.
Thank you, Jay. Terry Popino.
I live Push. Thank you. I'm Terry Popino. I live in Oregon City. And on Sunday last, when it was so very hot, I came home from church to retrieve my dog from a neighbor's house because he hates being alone. And I heard neighbors talking about, is she still there? And I said, is who still where? And there was a young woman lying under a neighbor's shrub with her head on the sidewalk, and she was clutching a dead pigeon. She was out. And I thought, oh my gosh, how long has she been lying here? It turns out that she had been downtown, and officers said, you can't be down here, you need to move. She knew of Father's Heart. She came up to get assistance, and they were closed. She wound up seeking shade under the bush, and she passed out. And I went to a neighbor and said, do you have a washcloth I can use? And I administered first aid. I washed her face. I wrapped the hand towel around her head. I finally managed to get some response out of her. Her eyes were closed, and she nodded, and we got her food, and we got her water, and I had a full skirt on, and I was standing like this, providing shade to her. And until the neighbors came and put up a table umbrella with the stand underneath it. I called 911 and said, we need medical response to check the welfare of this unconscious person. And they said, is she truly unconscious? And I said, well, she's not navigating under her own power. She said, well, where's the, and I had already told her what the nature of the emergency was and where the location was. And she said, oh, we know her. She's wearing a red sweatshirt and yoga pants? And I said, yes. Oh, we already know about her. I said, well, she has been laying in the sun since 9:30 this morning. It's now 2:30 in the afternoon, and I am worried about her welfare. And I understand, I have been an officer, I have worked with homeless people in shelters, I know what kidnapping is, I understand all of that, but the problem is there was no one to help. She came to the Father's Heart because she knew that that was a place to get help, but they didn't have the resources available. They are not open on Sundays. They were open that time 4 days a week for 4 hours each day. We noticed today that there's a new sign in the window of their door that says they're open 5 days a week. I think that it's a bit disingenuous that they are not following the requirements of the Good Neighbor Agreement, which is truly a good faith agreement by both parties. We haven't had a chance to participate in that. There are no teeth in Good Neighbor Agreements. I have no idea what a community engagement plan is. I haven't seen that. The day that we met last month, they provided de-escalation training to their employees on that very day before the hearing happened in the evening. And so it seems that at the very least, they should provide amenities to people who are coming when they're closed. There's no toilet available on their premises. So they're left, she woke up and said, oh, I need to poop. I have no idea where she went initially, but then she wound up over at Jessica's and was threatening them. So you understand that targeting this as a location that can provide help has to provide help. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. All right, I think we'll do two more and then we'll take a break in case someone drank too much water or needs to step outside for any other reason. Shoot, which way did I just grab these? Oh. Okay. Crystal, I'm sorry. Crystal Basler and Diane Kintz. State your name and city of residence.
My name is Crystal Bassler, and I live in technically Oak Grove, but it's Portland. So, my name is Crystal Bassler. I am an addict in recovery. I started using substances. Can you hear me? Is this better?
Is the green light on?
It is. My name is Crystal. I'm an addict in recovery. I started using substances when I was 11. I grew up in a home that was very abusive and full of addicts. I was in and out of group homes and foster homes since I was 12 years old. Even in the homes I was placed in, I was often neglected and abused, so I'd end up on the streets. I was a member of a gang, in and out of jail, homeless. I used drugs for 27 years of my life. I am now 40. I ended up homeless in Clackamas County after I lost my apartment. I slept in tents, sold drugs, stole, and whatever I could do, I had to do to survive. I lost my kids. My family was not talking to me. I started losing all hope. And one day a friend brought me to the Father's Heart, where I met Jennifer and Robin. I was shown love, and I had people that believed in me for the first time in a long time. I was severely broken, and Jennifer started to mentor me. Jennifer never gave up on me. She showed me tough love and would not hear my excuses. She held me accountable for my actions. I remember one time she caught me driving while I was suspended, and I got in trouble. She had tried to help me set up treatment, and I refused to go because I wasn't ready. I didn't want to face those demons. That is when she told me that she loved me and to come talk to her when I was really ready to change. I finally admitted I had a problem, and I went to treatment. Jennifer was there encouraging me, mentoring me, and teaching me who God was, and is still doing this to this day. Since graduating treatment, I have gone through Bridges to Change and graduated. The Father's Heart has helped me get into sustainable housing and an amazing career. Jennifer baptized me and continues to mentor me. The Father's Heart loved me until I could love myself, showed me that there was a better life, and saved my life. My clean date is 12/13/2018. I am a full-time student at Clackamas Community College. I will have my CADC in January and my Associates in Human Services Generalist in spring of 2023. I plan to continue my education and get my master's in social work, specializing in mental health and substance abuse. I am now able to help the same people I was homeless with regain their life and dignity and hope. I am a case manager at the Father's Heart Street Ministry. Robin and Jennifer have helped mold me into the person I am today, a person who my kids and family are proud of. I get to help plant a seed of hope in people who have lost all hope. I get to save lives just like the Father's Heart did for me. I never chose to be homeless or addicted to drugs. It was all I ever knew. Now I live a different life, and I know it's because of the kindness, love, and guidance of the Father's Heart. The Father's Heart will always be my home. They gave me a safe place to go when I had nowhere else to go. They provided me with showers, interview clothes, food, love, warmth, and a love for God that I never knew. I am forever grateful for the Father's Heart. They saved me, and now I get to pay it forward and save others.
Thank you, Crystal. Diane Kintz.
My name is Diane Kintz. I live in Clackamas. I am a long-term volunteer at the Father's Heart. I am not as well prepared as some of the people that have spoken today. I actually have had some issues going on, but I'm here to affirm a lot of what Crystal said from the volunteer perspective. The people who make the heartbeat of the Father's Heart have continued in Terry's footsteps, and I think they keep growing and trying to improve. I'm always happy when I'm at the Father's Heart. It's not always pretty. There's messes and imperfections, as with all things that involve people. But I do feel, I don't know all the rules, I can't cite them either, but I know that there was always someone I could go to when I had a question about behaviors. I felt that the clients we served policed themselves sometimes. They took pride in what we offer at the Father's Heart, and they would call out the bad behavior of others sometimes. I know that COVID challenged the Father's Heart, and I feel like we rose to it, always trying to find a way to provide the services, honor the needs of the clients, but also the needs of the communities. One of the things that has struck me over the years is when we start with prayer every day, that I'm there, and I believe every day, there is always, Robin always prays for the community, the police that serve it, is well aware that the kindness of the people around us help us provide that service. So I believe the night shelter it is a challenge for the neighborhood, clearly, but it is a challenge that people do want to rise up and meet by not having to read in the newspaper the next day, like we did after the ice storm or like we did after the severe heat, that human beings that people care about, whether that's your person you care about, it's somebody's mother, it's somebody's brother, it's somebody's sister. It's something that can be done, and that's what the Father's Heart does. It does what can be done, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Diane. Okay, at this point, we're going to take a 5-minute break for anybody that needs it, and we'll be back in 5 minutes. Okay, can everybody take their seats, please? Okay, thank you very much. All right, we are back from break, and we're going to go right back into public comments. We have about 8 to go. And next is, I'm going to guess it's German, Ed Riephoff and Trevor DeBoer. Okay, thank you. First, it's going to be Ed. Please state your name and city of residence, and then it'll be Trevor right after that.
Hi, my name's Ed Reboth. I live in Clackamas. I was a homeless drug addict, and the Father's Heart has helped me in many ways. During the winter when it was cold, I did use their warming shelters. It was nice to be able to go someplace that was safe and warm to sleep at night. They had staff that was up all night long to make sure that nobody else bothered you while you were asleep. But I know when I used it, there was, you couldn't get there long before it opened. You know, I heard that tonight that people were milling around, but we were limited to a certain amount of time you could be there before it opened, and then you had to leave the area, you know, when it closed. It saved my life. I know it did. I was a drug addict for 40 years and homeless for 20. And now I live in a home. I'm just about ready to become a certified recovery mentor. They do build relationships with people, and that does change lives. I guess that's really all I got to say today.
Thank you very much, Ed.
Hi, I'm Trevor DeBoer of Gladstone. Just moved from Oregon City. I'm just going to keep it about the night shelter. I started out, I've worked at many night shelters, and it was where I learned the Father's Heart. What I learned from the Father's Heart is how to run a night shelter. When I went to the next one, and then the next one, I took what I learned from there, and the ones I went to were just totally out of control, where the people were everywhere and everything. Father's Heart keeps their people pretty much under control. Yes, it's not nice with the foot traffic coming and going, but for the most part, they do. And I implemented the stuff that I learned from the Father's Heart at several other night shelters, and now both of them, 2 of them are still running very smoothly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trevor. I'm sorry, I was writing down some notes. Okay. Stephen Morris and John Goodlow. If it's not Goodlow, I am sorry. We'll start with Stephen. Please state your name and city of residence.
My name's Stephen Morris, and I live in Oregon City, about a block from the My Father's Heart. And I moved there about 3 years ago, my wife and I, from Portland. And I can tell you in Portland, where we lived in Foster Powell District, we had a bad homeless problem. And we talk constantly about how much we appreciate Oregon City and our current McLaughlin neighborhood and the tight-knit sense of community that we have there, and the much, much lesser homeless problem that we have there than we did in Portland. Yeah, no one's saying that nothing good is happening at My Father's Heart. I'm sure they do a lot of good things there. I also sort of look at it with the long view in mind, is that if this measure passes and they're allowed to become a night shelter, down the road, is there going to be more expansion of services where they become not just an emergency shelter, but a permanent night shelter, other things that would have an increased homeless traffic in the community. And I think right now we already see plenty of signs and instances of impact on the community that really should not be in a residential area that are due to My Father's Heart's presence there. Myself personally, we've had our fence broken and found camping gear in the trees behind our house on our small property. And so I would urge you to not allow this to pass. And I think that it would adversely affect the community and would not be part of the good neighbor sort of clause. I also had a question about this community enhancement, I think it was called, the community engagement plan, which we've heard nothing about, and I think it's kind of ridiculous to have this completely passed and in place before the community even knows what it says. So I don't know if there's a way to change that, or if we can alter that, or maybe hold this proceeding until that is made public to the community that is going to be affected by it. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Steve.
Okay. Did we forget? It's Stephen? Oh, that was Stephen. I'm sorry. Thank you, Stephen. John.
John, yes, testing. My name's Sean Goodlow, Happy Valley. I could go on forever. I've heard a lot of good things tonight and I appreciate the opportunity to share. Real quick story about me. I became homeless a few years ago. Didn't expect to be there. Don't really want to go into the details of how I became homeless. But the point is I was there and I saw some things on the street. I've seen some things on the street, believe that. And I'm from this community. I grew up in Damascus. I went to Barlow. I've been in this town a long time, and I've seen it change in a lot of ways. And, but the things that I saw when I was homeless, some pretty disturbing things. But you know, the thing that bothered me the most is not what I saw the homeless do. It's what I saw some people that weren't homeless do. I can't count how many times I've had people call the cops on me when I was homeless, saying I was using drugs, sticking needles in my arm. I could go on forever. It was unbelievable, just the things that I saw normal people or not homeless people do and accuse me of doing. I've had every single one of my civil rights completely denied, not only by our justice system, by citizens. So anyways, a long story short, I came into some services and, you know, at Father's Heart. And when I walked in those doors, you know, people believed in me. You know, I got meals where most people would sit there and watch you die on the streets. It's almost like they wanted to see people down because it made them feel better about their own lives. Now, I know there's a lot of problems and there's issues. Not saying everybody that walks in there is perfect, but the services that are given there, they don't judge you. They love you where you're at. And it enabled me to start believing in myself again. They helped me, you know, it was a place where I can go get a shower, get a meal, use the phone, make contacts. They helped me get my license, you know, so I could start applying for jobs and things like that. And I caught a break and I made the most of it. But there are, like I said, there are no easy answers to solving the homeless problem. But it's not just going to go away. By denying Father Heart a permit to continue their services, that's not just going to, all of a sudden your white picket fence is going to appear more clear. That's not the way it's going to work. It's a much bigger, broader picture and problem than that, as a lot of you probably know. One of the main ones is when we vote in policies like, decriminalizing heroin and meth, you're going to see more needles on the streets. You're going to see a lot more problems throughout our society. So just, I know I'm getting cut off here, but thank you for letting me speak, and just consider the bigger, broader picture when you guys, you know, vote or whatever it is on this permit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I believe it's Heidi Mack and Christina Lugo. If it's not Heidi Mack, it looks, okay, all right.
Heidi McKay.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Heidi McKay, and I'd just like to pause for a second and for you to just take into account the people that have come here and told you where they're from, and the people that are from the area where the Father's Heart is, and how they're all from Morgan City, how the people that are all in support of this don't live here. So I too believe in the mission and the stories and the people. I think that what Father's Heart is doing is fantastic. And many of these people, like Dan said, have a story, and they need to be supported. Absolutely. I'm not denying any of the people here and their stories. I'm proud of them. I think that's phenomenal. But the livability in my neighborhood has done nothing but go down since Father's Heart has moved in. I have painted our intersection. I have tried to just turn away from the negative and stick to the positive. I've painted our intersection. I've put a lending library up. I've worked 6 years tirelessly on the Lauderet Park and the revitalization. I have come to City Council multiple times with this issue, saying that something needs to be done. And the livability has continued to go down. When I talk about livability, I mean feeling safe to leave my front door open while I'm inside doing dishes and feel safe that nobody is just gonna walk in. Livability means sleeping at night and not hearing people go through my trash or screaming profanities or fighting in the middle of the night. Livability means letting my child walk to the bus 4 blocks away in the morning at 7 a.m. when Father's Heart would release their overnight shelter use clients, and the clash of those two people. That is livability. That is instability in my neighborhood. The homeless and houseless of this community are now considered people that are a part of our community. They are here. They're considered residents of our community, and the city needs to take actual responsibility for this horrific epidemic and not put the issue of this magnitude on the shoulders of one small, disorganized, and wrongly placed shelter. The clients are allowed to use Wi-Fi at the facility with no, like the library has stipulations on how they can use their Wi-Fi. At Father's Heart, they can use whatever they want. I have it on good faith that they don't always just use it to look up jobs, but there's other things that they're looking at, particularly porn. And I wonder about the scenario in which mentally ill clients are ushered out the door at 7 a.m., the same time that one of my teenage neighbors is standing at the bus stop, literally less than 1 block away from this facility at 7 a.m. And under this permit, if this permit goes through, the city of Morgan City is sanctioning these two demographics being together in the same spot. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Heidi. Christina Lugo.
Hi, my name is Christina Lugo, but my preferred name is Emma. I'm a resident of Oregon City. I live at 1108 7th Street. I would like to say that, I have experienced most of the same things that everyone else in my neighborhood has discussed. I've had people defecate in my yard. I found homeless people in my backyard with their clothes off, doing something, I'm not sure what, completely drugged out, and not really making any sense and coherent. I get homeless folks regularly walking down the street screaming at night. I've called the police, and they aren't necessarily equipped to deal with folks who have substance abuse issues. But I am a member of a community, and these people are a member of my community too. My tradition, which is I'm Jewish, and I'm the vice chair of Congregation Shir Tikva, which is a liberal Jewish community in Portland. And our parsha this week is about justice. It's about justice and the pursuit of justice. And I know Marty personally. I knew Marty from a spin class that I was in, and I have followed his wife's work and the amazing work that she did. And I think that in Oregon City, it's amazing that we have a space that's really dedicated to serving these people. Now, I understand there's problems. I mean, but there's always been homeless people here in Oregon City. They've always camped out in Newell Canyon. When I first bought my house 11 years ago here in McLaughlin, during the time between when we made an offer on the house and when we actually moved in 6 months later, there had been homeless people living in our house. That's a reality of living in this neighborhood. There's homeless people here, and it's so much better here than it is up in Portland. I mean, I think that the city needs to take steps to deal with the homeless issue. I mean, I was on the city budget committee, and we only approved $40,000 for homeless services out of a $250 million budget. And obviously, these people need services that are far in excess of what's available. But the Father's Heart is doing something really essential. They're giving these people dignity. They're giving them a sense of humanity. There's a way in which you open up a door to someone, in which you allow them to feel like they're a human being, like they're part of this community. And even though they're drug addicts, even though they're homeless, even though sometimes they're even sex offenders, these people are still human beings, and they have a right to have an opportunity to make their lives better. And if I have to find poop in my yard sometimes, then I'll live with that, so that they have a place they can go and have an opportunity to make a difference. They may not always succeed. A lot of times they'll fail, but sometimes they succeed. And these people who have come in tonight to testify are signs of how when you get there and you make a difference for your community, you can actually make a difference in people's lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Patty Klar and John Kayantosh. It'll be Patty first, and state your name, city of residence. Thank you.
My name is Patty Klar. I am a 17-year resident of Oregon City and also a 7-year volunteer at the Father's Heart. So I do live in Oregon City and volunteer at the Father's Heart. I have volunteered mostly at the day shelter, but I have also volunteered at the night shelter on several occasions. First of all, I would like to commend the staff of this Planning Commission on their thorough preparation of the recommendation to approve the conditional use permit for the emergency night shelter. I especially appreciate the non-discrimination policy and recognition that the Father's Heart clients are also community members. You've done a really good job in that. I think you have addressed many of the issues that have been brought up, and reminding the council and the people here that this is for the night shelter only conditional use permit. The name, the emergency night shelter, is an obvious humanitarian need. The name alone shows the humanitarian need of it for the Oregon City during the winter months. I would also like to point out that there has been no cost to the city of Oregon City for providing this needed emergency service. Yet I have been told that the Father's Heart has been charged over $5,000 to apply for this permit. The Father's Heart is a small nonprofit relying on donations from residents like myself and churches. So I propose that this fee be waived or at least reduced in recognition of the service that the Father's Heart provides Oregon City. I think it is ridiculous that this nonprofit is charged over $5,000 to even apply for this use permit when it is an obvious humanitarian need during the winter months here in Oregon City. I would challenge the council and also the city commissioners to find a better qualified service offering in Oregon City for this next winter. I mean, in reality, you might have 2 months to find somebody else to provide this service. And I have, as a volunteer there, I have personally enforced some of the policies for conduct, both inside and outside the Father's Heart building. I have seen and heard Robin and Jennifer enforce the guidelines. I have heard Robin make announcements to clients reminding them of our good neighbor policy. I have heard her talk to a neighbor on the phone about wanting their input on the Father's Heart. She is open to discussions with neighbors. I have heard her really want to enforce the policies specifically for neighbors across the street. When she hears of a problem, she will, in a timely manner, try to fix that problem as much as she can. And I am sorry I'm out of time. I could say so much more, but I just thank you for your time, and I thank you for this recommendation to approve this use.
Thank you, Patty. John.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is John Kiantash. I live at 611 10th Street, so I live in the McLaughlin Conservation District. And I grew up in Oregon City, and I've seen the homeless population grow here like it has grown tremendously in Portland as well, in the whole Portland metro area. So there's some real issues, and these people need services. What's striking me this evening as I'm listening to people from my neighborhood and residents of Oregon City and the surrounding community is how so many people in this room want the right thing to be done. We've heard these emotional appeals from people whose lives have been changed by the Father's Heart, and we've also heard real problems by residents who are living next door to this. And what's really striking me about this is as anybody who studies geography or studies real estate knows, location matters, that zoning matters. And what we have here is, I think virtually, there wouldn't be any opposition to this, or virtually none, if this facility were sited in a non-controversial location. The Father's Heart could still do what they want to do. They could still help people. The people of the neighborhood would be supportive. But the distinction is that we wouldn't have this conflict of incompatible usage. I'm trying to think of other uses, ludicrous things like if a trucking company wanted to build a distribution warehouse next to the McLaughlin district, and they would say, it's great for jobs, it's great for the economy. And people would say, I agree, but we have industrial zones for that. We don't have heavy industry in residential areas. And similarly, I think about the people who have the homeless clients who are trucking up the steep hill to go up to the Father's Heart to get services during the day and perhaps at night. Many of them are coming from down near 99, down near the river and the downtown district. There is real estate down there that is ripe for development, would be very well suited to this sort of activity. And I think, no one here from the Father's Heart has pounded their fist about how magical the 603 12th Street address is. They've said we're doing wonderful things in the community, we change people's lives. It's the institution that is valuable. It's not that piece of land. And similarly, the residents of that district, many of them are compassionate for what the Father's Heart is trying to attempt. Their issue is the location. So when the city has said, the issues, it's not an issue about day use, that's going to continue, this is strictly a night use issue. I appreciate that from a simplification point of view, but as many of my fellow neighbors have said, this is one more step to allow this expansion into a night use facility, makes it more of a presence, more of an institution in an already inappropriate location. So what I would appeal, I know that the city wants to do the good thing. I really want to get behind this personally. I want to support this. And what I would just suggest to the commission, how about a very low rent lease in the appropriate property that the city owns, such as along 99, literally a quarter mile away, down the hill, something like that could serve the same population, and the residents wouldn't have a conflict with it. We wouldn't have this friction between incompatible uses butting up against one another. So That's what really strikes me this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay, that is it for the public comments. If I missed someone, please put your hand up. Okay. All right, we now have 5 minutes for the applicant's rebuttal. Now, you can obviously speak about whatever you want to speak about, but we know what we're here for and we know what we're here discussing. So, if that's what you want to stick to, it's up to you, but you got 5 minutes. Oh, I'm sorry, just for the record, your name and city of residence.
Marty Gant, Estacado, Oregon, president of Father's Heart. This is obviously an emotional situation for everyone involved. The impact to the community was never our intention to cause anyone any grief or harm. Simple comments that I could make are, other people experience some of these same things and we're not anywhere near them. It bothers me, and I don't mean to offend someone, but then when they say that they watch porn in our building, it's an absolute utter lie because we've never allowed it. We monitor those computers. We only have one right now. I mean, things like that are just troubling to our heart. We want to solve this problem, and I'm willing to open the dialogue with the community. We talk about we didn't open dialogue, but the community didn't open dialogue with us. We never came in the dark of the night like I was accused of. We've always been above board. We've applied for this at the urging of the city commissioners because it's an emergency need. We have rules, we have a process, and we're willing to even look at a new building. But we have limitations to cost. My point is we have open dialogue with people that want to solve this and help us, and we're willing to do that. There's nothing off the table, but we have to come together. So we're trying to do that through the process that we're allowed to do so. We're open to the community, come to us. We're willing to come to them. We've sent emails to the McLaughlin neighborhood and got nothing back, and yet they say we don't communicate. So there's a misrepresentation there in the sense of what we see, but I know that we're saving lives. I know we're saving lives through everything we're doing. So my only rebuttal is I want to do better for you guys. I really do. But I have to continue with the mission of saving those people on the street that are at risk. And there's hundreds of them. Now, the other part of this that I'm going to close with is that today, we're not what we were 5 years ago, or even 3 years ago. When I lost my wife, the ministry went through a lot because we were in kind of a state of flux and frankly, a lot of hurt. For not only the staff, myself obviously, but even the community of homeless people. We're making big changes. I have 5 case managers today. We have housed over 300 people recently. We have 100 people in a program right now in a hotel shelter program with the county. So to think that we're not getting people off the streets is just misinformation. The traffic, I intentionally drove around for the last 2 weeks in the neighborhoods trying to see some of the things that people are talking about. I personally didn't see the problems, but they've lived them, and I'm not going to tell you that they don't have those emotions because they're real to them. This is not an easy thing for any of us. I've seen people almost at death's door walk in our door, and today they're living and paying bills and paying their rent and doing all the things that we expect them as citizens. So, my hope is that you'll process this properly, allow us to save the people that we need to be saved, that we will continue to work with the community and help. We want to be part of the community. We want to be a light. Someday, people are going to look back and go, they were groundbreaking. Terry saw agencies across the area that would not work together. today we're working together. Today we're trying to find solutions, and frankly, we are on a good path. Over the course of the next year, we will see many people housed and off the streets. Can I save everyone? No. By the way, Oregon City PD now has a mental health liaison there. So when we have a crisis management, we call them. So we have a de-escalation process. We have mental health process. We have a lot of resources that probably people didn't know about. It's growing for us, and we're expanding ourselves. So I could ramble for a lot longer, and I'm right near the end, but I want the community to know, and I want the commission to know that we have heard and we will respond to the best of our abilities. But don't shut us down with the thought that we're just this agency that doesn't know or doesn't care, because we have qualified people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gant. Before you go, I wanted to ask staff, if we have questions for Mr. Gant, is that something we should bring him back up for, or is this the time to ask him?
I would recommend asking questions to Mr. Gant right now, and then if you feel inclined later, you can close the hearing or the record, depending on what you would like to do.
Okay, so if we have something to ask him before he goes back to his seat. All right. Anybody wanted to ask him anything? Okay, I did have one question. There was a concern about, I don't know if it's relevant to what our decision is going to be here, but for the person that had the problem when you guys were closed, is there any kind of a contact?
Absolutely.
For the facility when you're not open?
We've developed a 24-hour response hotline.
And how would people have that number?
Well, we're making it more aware to the public. It's one of these things that we get better as we learn the holes in the system. I don't want to tell you that we have a perfect system. In the past, it's probably been failure because people said they couldn't get hold of us. But we're continually to get that out. We're producing that number. I actually have a number. Robin, we have on-call people. We respond. The point is that we do have a response process, and we will get that number published in some manner. It'll be on our website if it's not already. And Robin, if it's not there, it should be, and that change will be made, because we do have a response process.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Do you mind if I ask a question too? If you guys are done? Sorry. Laura Terway, Community Development Director for the City of Oregon City. We've heard tonight a lot of, it seems like there's been a lot of place for dialogue to happen. I mean, it sounds like there's been a willingness for dialogue to happen around all parties. I was wondering if it's feasible for us to continue this hearing farther into the future to provide space for the applicant to perhaps meet with the neighbors in the neighborhood and work through the community engagement plan and the good neighbor agreement and work through some of these places where there's gaps in communication before we come back. That would require an extension of our 120-day decision, but it would really provide a space for what I feel like I'm hearing on both sides, which is a place for dialogue and clarity.
I'm more than willing to listen to those and talk with that and engage in that. My biggest concern is that we don't go into November when this whole program needs to be enlisted, because the emergency is going to happen November 1. This is taking a lot longer than was anticipated. We've done our due diligence. I'm willing to meet with the community and discuss these things to address the issues. So yes.
We worked a tentative schedule backwards, so we would have enough time for the city commission to make adequate decisions by November 3rd. If this is an avenue that you wanted to, again, you're in control of the timeline as the applicant legally. So I think the proposal is it depends how many meetings or how much space you need for meetings with the neighbors. But the furthest back that we could push it in order to make a decision by November 3rd and provide 3 hearings for the city commission, so sufficient space for them to make a determination. If the planning commission needs 2 meetings, then that puts us on September 13th. So you could continue the 120-day date past to November 15th or something like that. And then that would provide a space for you to have multiple meetings and sort of create this dialogue and work through some of these issues.
I would like to have the McLaughlin neighborhood have a point of contact or a liaison that can really compile the complaints and the issues so we can address them one at a time and get resolution, if that's what this would help do. Because I don't want the neighbors to be frustrated with us for not doing what we are they think we're not doing.
One sec.
Is it Heidi? Yeah. If Heidi would want to speak, she'd have to come back up. But it's all right, but we would have to get done with Mr. Gant first.
I can repeat a question if
You want to just bring her up?
if you're willing to, or you can bring, oh, sorry. Better? Sorry. I can repeat the question from the audience, or you can go back and open up the public testimony and bring the question back up.
Open the public hearing back up so she can...
Yeah, because right now you're at applicant's rebuttal. You can go back.
I think I closed it.
Or I can repeat it sounded like there's a question about how the additional meetings would work, and if there would be facilitation on the city's behalf. And it sounds like there's some additional questions. I'll leave it up to the chair if you want to open it back up to explore this avenue, or we'll leave it with you. It's just a potential
rabbit
path.
hole on that one. I think we know what the questions pretty much are. It's going to be about community engagement. There's work to do. I mean, the main thing is we don't want to drag this out so far that like he's concerned, we're just delaying it, which it can turn into. Commissioner Mitchell, do you want to add something?
I guess I'll just say I'm not in favor of a continuance. I don't think, based on what I've heard tonight, I don't think we're going to change the neighbors' minds that this is not an appropriate use in that location. I understand what you're trying to do, and to me, if we approve the conditional use, then that's when those meetings need to happen to really get a good neighbor policy that makes sense. But if we think we're going to get Mr. Gant together with the neighbors, and the neighbors are going to decide that this is a proper use in their community, that's not going to happen. I would prefer to see us go through our process.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Okay. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Gant?
Staff.
Okay. All right. Okay, we're good.
Okay, one last comment. We're not going to expand. We don't have the capacity, we don't have the ability, we don't have the facility, so that's not going to be an issue for the neighborhood. As far as growth, we're doing what we do, and we're limited by what we have.
All right.
But I would be open to another building. Just saying.
All right, thank you. All right. So at this point, we will close the public hearing. And now we need to discuss exactly where we're going. So.
Chair Schlaffenhager.
Commissioner West.
I was confused, or I'm a little confused at what Ms. Turway is proposing. Is she proposing meetings between the neighborhood and...
That's what it sounded like.
Before...
we make a decision.
So that maybe we would have possibly different conditions of approval, or different not findings, but we could probably have different conditions of approval, maybe?
Or the communication could go nowhere, and when we don't know. So maybe we, as Commissioner Mitchell said, maybe we should go through the process as it is, which still provides for communication between the applicant and the neighborhood. But we could possibly add some conditions we see fit.
You're free to add whatever conditions of approval tie to the approval criteria.
All right. So what kind of ideas do we have?
What was that last thing? What was the last thing Laura just said?
We're free to add.
You're free to add any conditions of approval that you would like. We would just want discussion about what approval criteria it's tied to, so we make sure that we get adequate findings associated for each of those.
It needs to be relevant.
Yeah. And the other thing is that what we're doing tonight is making recommendation to the city commission.
That's all it is, yeah. Unless we deny it, and then it would have to be appealed. But if we make an approval, it's still up to the city commission. It's still not our decision.
Okay.
So. Now, my feeling on this is, since they have other avenues to get this approved, maybe the best way for the community to have maximum input in it is if we provide it in our decision. I mean, that's the way I see it. Doesn't mean it's right, but that's kind of how I'm seeing it. And then I'm thinking maybe that's the best. I still think it's good for applicant. It's not completely one-sided. We're not trying to say we're pushing for everything going in the community's favor. But the applicant is part of the community. The homeless people are part of the community, and then the neighbors that own homes, pay rent. I mean, they're part of the community too, and we're trying to balance all that. So I'd love to have some good ideas here.
So are we basically deliberating right now?
That's what I'm.
Is that what we're doing? Okay. Yeah.
Sounds like the hearing was closed. It sounds like you want to close the record as well?
If we have no more questions for the applicant, then we could close the record. All right, then we will close the public record. And we need to see what we want to add. I would love some kind of accountability, definitely, on the community engagement plan. Having a plan and having nothing good come out of it, I mean, it still seems like a possibility if there's no enforcement. And I know that they're doing good things, but you don't get 40 people in here when it's all good. We've never had that. We've never had 15 people, regardless of the application. So it's good for the city at the expense of others. And again, we know the criteria that we're looking at. It's the night shelter. And I think the thing we're focusing on the most is livability for all the citizens, which includes everyone. So, yeah. Maybe we get some advice. Yeah, please, thank you.
You do have provision 1756070, periodic review of conditional use permits, which allows the city commission to designate classes of previously issued permits for periodic review. So you can add in your recommendation a suggestion for the city commission to come back for the shelter. We would need more findings as to why in the next year or something like that. The provisions allow additional conditions of approval to be imposed in light of changing circumstances and more efficient implementation of the city's comprehensive plan.
When you say periodic, are you talking quarterly, whenever the need arises?
It's unspecified, so it provides the city commission the latitude to decide what that is. We have before, let's see. I've been here 18 years. I can think of maybe one where there was an initial comeback, like a couple years later, a year later, something like that. Traditionally, conditional uses don't come back on a regular schedule, but maybe two. We've done like a year check-in.
Could it be more often than that if we asked it to be? I'm just
I would
worried that they have to wait a year before they can bring up something that hasn't gone well.
I'd be mindful in what the check-in looks like. In the past, it's looked like a new conditional use permit where people had to basically reapply and go through the planning commission and city commission, which does take time to get a complete application and work through the process. So the ones that I'm thinking of were on a yearly basis, just to accommodate the process.
Commissioner West.
I was thinking that when she's talking about checking on the permit renewing, that isn't the same as the community engagement piece. And I was hoping that we could have more, right now it's once a year. I was hoping that maybe we could have one maybe sooner than later, and they could work through setting up what it's going to be like for winter. Maybe then one right after winter, so that there's feedback and they can work on it. The other thing, and, you know, I don't recall driving by, would porta potties help outside for some of the other issues?
Excuse me, the record is closed, and there's not going to be any more testimony unless the chair asks the record to be reopened. So I'd appreciate your courtesy and allow the commission to proceed with their deliberation.
So that was one of my thoughts of it. But definitely more community dialogue meetings. I don't know what's reasonable in a year, 3 times early on before the winter hits.
Why not quarterly?
Or quarterly?
Quarterly, yeah.
I see no problem with quarterly. I mean, if it seems to be going well, then I think we could change it, but I don't think we should be restricted to re-examining it for a year. I mean, it just seems like a long time, especially if the winter comes in 4 months. So what can we put in there? And again, I mean, this is going to go to city commission after us.
Can I follow up to understand what you're saying about, are you saying quarterly meetings with the neighborhood?
Right.
So
between the
so there'll be, as part of the community engagement plan, there'll be quarterly meetings
instead of once a year as it was.
Instead of once a year.
And maybe we could build some trust there and a relationship and some solutions.
Yes, Laura.
Sorry to step in when you guys are
No, that's okay.
going through this, but it is 9:59 and it will soon turn 10. At 10 o'clock, we'll need an agreement to continue on. We can continue on until 11 at the latest.
Okay.
I'll make a motion, we continue till 11, or continue past 10.
I'll second it.
Okay, you want to call roll?
I'm calling it. I normally do.
Aye.
Aye. So are we basically discussing
anything we want to add?
Conditions
of approval.
A possible, right. The things that I'd like to bring up as well are...
Yeah, anything.
I guess I just want to everyone remember that this is an application for an existing use. That is not the question tonight. It's about, can they use this facility when the temperatures are freezing so people can have a warm place to be at night. The whole question about the overall use of the property is a separate question, correct?
It's not part of our...
Yeah, so if we're really kind of focused tonight on what the application is all about, it's not about whether this is an appropriate use of that property.
Correct.
Correct?
Yeah, right. What we can talk about is, like with the reviews, we can talk about how well did only the night shelter operate. We can't talk about the rest of it. Right. That's not what this application is about. Right. This application is about the night shelter.
Right.
And we can re-examine how that went.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure if it'd be us, it probably wouldn't. It'd be the community engagement plan. But it would be tied directly to just the night shelter.
Yeah, right.
Which is what we're voting on, what we're making the decision on here.
Okay, just want to clarify that.
Right, so any condition we put on it would only relate to that. Wouldn't relate to any of the other uses, wouldn't relate to the day use, would have nothing to do with that. Okay.
I agree with Tiffany,
Daphne?
With Daphne's suggestion about having more regular community engagement meetings. I think that would be great. I think quarterly would be a much better, more timely way of the Father's House engaging with the community. I think having some language in the conditions of approval that talk about, we talked earlier about what would constitute the revocation of the conditional use. So maybe there's something in the language of the conditions of approval that say, if this doesn't happen, then you're in danger of losing your conditional use. Perhaps we could also say that there are some kinds of restrictions about when do they have to be checked in at a certain time? Like, does someone have to come at a certain time, or can it be all night? Can someone show up at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m, or?
From what I heard, they're supposed to be there at a certain time, but
Right.
if someone shows up an hour late and there's someone to let them in, it sounded like they let them in.
Right, okay.
And then they're not held hostage, so they're free to leave if they choose to leave. It's not a check-in, lock-in type of a situation.
Right.
So
I think the last thing I want to say is that the codes require like a certain number of restrooms, a certain kind of occupancy for the building. All those things will be monitored by the building department, by the city. So those are all things that are kind of givens. Or
the health department, yeah.
Yeah, so we don't have to worry about that. I don't think the general public or people who live in the neighborhood need to worry about that not happening, because those are issues that will be monitored, that people can make, like if the building can only be used for certain uses and certain square footage for a certain number of people. You have to have a certain number of restrooms for a certain number of people, et cetera, et cetera. So tonight we're not really changing any of that or suggesting there's any changes to that, right? I think that's something that just needs to be reiterated and expressed.
Yeah.
That if we do make a motion tonight to approve this application, the building will still have to be used in the proper way according to codes, city codes.
Yeah. One thing I'd like to add is, although we can have some say in the communication that should be happening, it doesn't mean it should only happen every quarter. I mean, they should be able to discuss any issue they have every day. It shouldn't be, every quarter, let's talk about what went wrong last month or like the last 3 months. The facility should be reachable at all hours, in my opinion. I don't know if we can put that in there, but it sounds like some people had trouble reaching people at all hours. But as the applicant stated, they've been progressing, and nobody's perfect at the beginning. Nobody's ever perfect. We're not perfect. We do code amendments because the codes aren't perfect. We're always trying to improve. So I think as long as the applicant does his best to, improve, and if people have a issue with some of the ways that the facility is functioning, they should be able to get some instant feedback. That's my feeling on it. I feel in some ways the facility has failed the neighborhood in some ways. I think they've served the neighborhood in good ways, but they haven't served, part of the community is the neighborhood that it's in. And I think there's been some failures there. So I think that's the key to getting this to the point where the neighbors, feel strongly about the facility. I think it could happen. I don't think it's ever going to be perfect. I don't think anywhere you put it is going to be perfect. You put it downtown near Main Street, the businesses are going to complain. You know, the restaurant's going to complain, oh, now they're hanging out in front of our porch, you know. But you can't call them, you know, them, it's because they're people. It's not a specific group, that we can't stereotype them into a cluster of people that we don't seem to like. The residents too, you know, so I'm talking way too much. Let's keep it to, you know, what exactly do we want to put in there? Commissioner Mitchell, your finger's up. I know you got something going on in there.
I'll start by saying that I'm really concerned at what I heard tonight about that state law and what the implications could be. But I've got to set that aside. As Ms. Richter said, put our blinders on. And I appreciate what the other commissioners have said about additional conditions. But the problem I have, I don't think we can get there with conditions. Because, as we all know, our legal rights and what the applicant said, they have no control over their clients when they leave the property. And the issues for the neighborhood begin when they leave the property. So I don't think we can get there with conditions. And when I look at our criteria, number 2 says that the site has to be in a suitable location. And that means more than just that location, it means the surroundings. More importantly, condition number 4, that it will not substantially limit or impair the normal use of the surrounding properties. I've been on the Planning Commission for 3 years. I've never voted against a conditional use because in my mind, and it's a subjective decision for all of us, but in my mind, none of these other ones ever got too substantial in my mind. But this one does. We have codes so that the neighbors have a reasonable expectation of what's going to happen in their neighborhood. And to me, this goes beyond that. And also, to me, there's a substantial difference. I want to keep, as Commissioner Staggs said, we got to keep it separate. But I think there's substantially more impact from a night facility than there is from the day use facility. I was struck by what Mr. Fowler said when he talked about an emergency declaration from the city that would allow for additional facilities of this type from the non-governmental agencies that want to do this, because I don't think this burden should land on one neighborhood and one set of neighbors. The other thing I was very impressed when I heard it, and I'm sorry I don't remember the gentleman's name, but he said that he's always looking for a permanent solution as fast as possible. And so am I, and so are all of us. And I don't think a conditional use permit on this site, which is essentially going to take off the pressure on Father's Heart and on our city commission to find a more suitable solution, find a more suitable location. Because once if you look at our code and what it says about conditional uses, yes, they can be reviewed, but only to add additional conditions. And yes, they can be revoked, but only if one or more conditions aren't being lived up to and that those conditions are essential to the conditional use. So my concern, we approve a conditional use, it's going to be in place for a long time. And I don't think it's the desirable solution. And like I said, I appreciate the commissioner's good thoughts on trying to improve the conditions. But at least for me, I just don't think we can get there.
Thank you. In the conditions of approval, number 3 had to do with finalize the community engagement plan in compliance with all items required by OCMC 17.56040 H2, maybe we could get a legal clarification from Ms. Richter about what exactly that means and what we're required to do?
Sorry, that section that is referenced in the condition requires the shelter to maintain a written community engagement plan, and it lists out several elements that are required to be incorporated into the plan, which are description of purpose and scope of services of the shelter, population to be housed at the shelter, and the process and criteria for selection of guests, bed capacity for nightly guests, hours of operation and curfew, if applicable, 24-hour contact information, and explanation of how the shelter will address concerns/complaints. So that condition is requiring them to submit a finalized community engagement plan after the meeting is held. That addresses all of those components that are required to be in the plan.
Okay. So as far as Oregon City Code, that's as far as we could push that? If we were trying to add conditions, where would that legally fit?
Well,
Since
I think
the code says a certain thing.
Well, I think that what what I heard Commissioner West say, and then sort of discussion around was quarterly meetings, and I think that the condition would be revised to add a sentence or two into item 3 that says the applicant shall include the provision of quarterly meetings as part of their community engagement plan. And shall have minutes of those meetings and post those meeting minutes on the website, just like condition 5 requires. Oh, the good neighborhood policy has to be on the Father's Heart website, so I think that all of that would be housed on the Father's Heart website, so that then not only could the public get access to it, the neighborhood could, the public could, everybody would know. So it would be a repository. Again, the city doesn't want to be managing a use. So we can draft conditions, but we have to have sort of trust at some point that folks are going to go and do what the conditions require, and then we have an enforcement process if they don't.
Okay, and then clearly the commission would need to be in agreement on that, because it doesn't sound like we are completely in agreement on that. So before we pursue that any further, we need to know, is that somewhere we want to even go?
What was the question? I missed that. What are you saying, Dirk?
Well, it seems like the Oregon City Municipal Code, it tells us it should be annual meetings, so maybe making them quarterly is more our personal opinions rather than requirements from, that the city would normally put on an application. Yes, Mitchell, Mr. Mitchell.
I'm going to put another hat on here.
We need lots of hats.
Not knowing what the decision of the commission is going to be. So I'm going to provide input on these conditions, even though I have concerns that I've already expressed. I would like to see a public meeting, a meeting with the neighborhood at a reasonable time period after the first week or so of operation. Because if we have a quarterly meeting, our winter is over. So I know and this is not, this isn't a public meeting in the sense of a city meeting where the notification and all of that would be required, right? Would this be done under the auspices of the neighborhood association, or is this, how would we handle that?
Our code does require that notice is provided to property owners within 300 feet, the neighborhood association, and the city prior to the meeting.
And that would include a meeting that is driven by their good neighbor policy and not by, well, it is in our conditions, isn't it? So
Well, it wouldn't be a public meeting, but it would be conditions requiring a notice and a notice to the city and a neighborhood meeting that they would have, and it wouldn't be a public meeting under the Oregon Public Records Meetings Law.
But it would require the notification that's spelled out elsewhere in our code.
Yes. The condition provides for notice, and I believe the code provides for notice too, to people within 300 feet.
Yeah, I see that in condition number 4. It also says the meeting shall be open to the public and must be held a minimum of once a year. So what would be triggers for making it more often? Multiple cold weather events? I can only imagine maybe.
Well, I think if, under Commissioner Mitchell's idea would be, the meeting shall occur 1 week after within 2 weeks after the first cold weather event or opened event.
Right, yeah, that sounds reasonable. No, he was
and then if you wanted to do it quarterly thereafter, or,
Okay, I'm gonna touch on that. I mean, Commissioner Mitchell makes perfect sense. I'm talking quarterly, but we're only talking about the cold weather condition, which is really only gonna happen maybe 1 quarter a year. It's not gonna happen in the summer. There'd be no point in having a quarterly meeting on this application, which only addresses cold weather shelter. Yeah, so you're right. That would be worded improperly, and it'd be irrelevant. So, what he was mentioning with a week or 2 after a cold weather event, I mean, that could be good timing. If we could word that somehow like that.
I mean, the problem's going to be that you got to give notice, right? And you still got to guess of when the cold weather event's going to, so the cold weather event's going to happen, then you've got to give notice, then you got to have the meeting. So it may not happen within 2 weeks. It may be more like a month, and the cold weather periods are going to be when there are holidays and things like that. So, I mean,
it's still better than once a year.
For sure, and it is better to have it right after they open, perhaps, but perhaps it's better to have it before they open so that they can have discussions about it.
Well, I mean, it'd be more like what happened during the event. I think it'd be better after the event.
Or one of each, have one before and talk about how they think it's going to go, and then maybe after.
It's whatever we put in there. And how do we phrase it? What kind of direction do we give to staff?
Can I raise just a kind of a more fundamental question? I mean, can we kind of put that aside for a second?
Yes.
Because earlier when Mike was describing his thoughts, I was thinking back to, okay, so the shelter right now is being used currently in the wintertime.
Under emergency
use for the freezing weather, so.
Yeah. They're trying to get a permanent.
Right, so it's a permanent conditional use to use the facility when the temperatures are below freezing. But they're already doing that now every winter.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's granted every year.
Right. So the thought that if we were to approve this conditional use, that somehow it would be worse in the future. We're just really approving a use that's already being used for.
It seems that
That's right.
It seems to happen every year.
Yeah.
But with this process, we can control some things. In an emergency use, we don't have any control. It's granted, it just happens. But here we can do some things. We can put some things into the conditions of approval. Whether or not they help, we don't know. We can't predict the future. But we have an applicant that seems to be open to improving what they're doing. And we're tied to what we can actually do here, right? We're very narrow scope of what's legally allowed for us to make decisions on here. Okay, so. Okay, is that enough direction for staff as far as what we'd like to see with the community engagement a week before? Well, but then how do you know it's going to be?
Well, say October or whatever.
We could look at a calendar and kind of, guess.
Yeah, lately our weather's been so
1st.
off. Yeah.
I don't know.
Sometimes October's brutally cold.
I would suggest if you wanted to just say before you open, you have to have a meeting, so then they can share the contact information and that sort of thing. And then maybe during the duration that they are open, so not an exact time, but somewhere in those winter months. And then if you wanted to do a debrief after the winter season is over, you can have a third one if you want to. But perhaps make it a little more general of
Yeah.
Well, because it's for under 33 degrees Fahrenheit, which we sometimes get a frost in October.
including wind chill.
Yeah. So
typically it started around November-ish in the past.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, can I bring up another one? I would like to,
please.
I would like to see some kind of a phone number so that in an emergency thing in the middle of the night with somebody's out of hand, that people can call without calling the police first.
The applicant mentioned that that number was going to be available. I don't know if it's going to be on the door. I mean, that seemed like a good place to put it, but it should be a well-known number.
Yeah, the community engagement plan includes a requirement for the 24-hour contact information, and then we have the condition to post it online as well, so hopefully it's more accessible. And then to talk about it at those check-in meetings.
Okay. Okay, is that the limits of the direction for staff that we wanted to pursue?
I am thinking that's all I would want to add at this point, because through their community engagement meetings quarterly, they might come up with some things, and then, they might be the answer to their, not us, of what they needed done in the neighborhood.
Right, and the city commission can see this a different way than we see it.
Yes.
We may be putting a whole lot of effort into these conditions, and then the city commission decides we didn't even see it right. But if they agree with it, maybe we've come up with some good ideas. So if we're not going to add anything else, maybe we can get a recap of what we've asked for.
Yeah, and I wanted to just add one clarifying point about the order of things as far as the community engagement plan and the required community meeting. So prior to the first night of operation, as a temporary warming shelter, the applicant is required to hold the initial community engagement meeting. At that meeting, they're finalizing the plan, then they're required to provide a copy of the community engagement plan to the city and the neighborhood association and post it on their website. And then after that initial meeting is when the annual meeting or quarterly potentially would take place. So there's an initial meeting that's required before operating for the very first time, and then the additional meetings at whatever time increment is appropriate.
Okay, all right, is that agreeable?
Just to clarify, so the cadence of the meetings is quarterly?
Could you say that again, Laura?
Sorry. Can you clarify the cadence of the check-in meetings with the neighborhood? Is it quarterly, I've heard, or before, during, after?
I don't know if quarterly makes any sense since it's seasonal. So do we put that in there at all? Or do we put something else in?
If you'd like them more than once a year, we're just looking for the commission's direction on how often.
Yeah, I don't know.
I get it that winter's only a few months of the year, but how can, I just think communication is the only thing we have here. And
Yeah.
But
Why not
we're
have
talking
it more?
about the cold weather.
well, as they can talk about it, but as they build the communication, maybe there's maybe the hours change, maybe there's, somebody donates more money, maybe they, who knows what can
Well, that
come.
would be a different application if they were going to go for something else. But we're
Well,
just
to help
discussing-
them with their night shelter, I don't, I'm just,
Well, they're free to communicate all year long, but, our scope is.
yeah, but in an organized neighborhood meeting, sure, we want them to answer the phone, pick up the phone.
Yeah.
Well, it's up to you. If that's too much, make it 2 times, before it and then after.
I think before and after is all that's.
And then maybe
Oh, that's all
after-
that's needed, yeah, just do before and after, 2 times a year.
Yeah. Maybe after the first event and then after the winter? Okay. So before it's used the first time in the winter, and then after the first event, and then after the end of the season. Whenever that is. No specific dates.
Could I read something from the staff report?
Sure.
It's page, actually, there's no page numbers here, but it's in the chapter 17.56. Oh, okay, so it's page 18, down under section 4. Says the primary purpose of this proposal is to provide an indoor space for homeless community members during cold winter nights so that they are not outside. There have been many public comments received identifying trespassing, noise, illegal or disruptive behavior of the clientele. However, those are not regulated by the zoning code, but rather through the police department or local noise ordinance. I think we have to keep in mind that what we're doing here tonight is not, we are not fixing any of the problems about how this existing use is currently being used. We're not fixing that tonight. We're just simply saying, yes, you can use this at night for when it's freezing. We're not solving the bigger problem tonight. I think that's important to keep in mind.
Yeah, no, we're not here to solve all the problems.
And we know that that's a huge regional problem. So.
Okay. With what we've added to the conditions of approval, is anybody ready to make a motion? Or more comments?
as difficult as I know this whole conversation is, I'm going to make a motion to follow staff recommendations to approve this application. Application GLUA 21-00019 and CU 21002.
Second. Or with conditions.
With the added conditions?
With the conditions that we've discussed, I'm making a motion to approve the application. Well, all we're doing is we're recommending it to the city commission.
That's all we're doing.
So it's in the city, yeah.
All this has to go through them. So motion by Commissioner Staggs and then second by Commissioner Gage.
And just for clarity, the amended conditions include allowing or requiring the neighborhood check-in before the first event every year and then after the end of the season every year, rather than the one check-in per year identified in the recommendation.
Correct. And then, yeah, call roll, please.
Aye.
Aye.
No.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, the next hearing on this will be before the City Commission on Wednesday, August 18th. So it's a week from Wednesday in this room at 7 p.m. So the agenda will be posted online.
And thank you, everybody, for coming. And unfortunately, you'll have to do it again in front of the City Commission. I wish we could have done more, but there's just not a lot we can do in these. Okay. Moving on to our second agenda item, minutes from May 10th, 2021. Did we review them? Did they look correct? Would someone like to make a motion on them?
I'll move to approve the May 10th, 2021 Planning Commission minutes.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Mitchell.
And second.
Second by Commissioner West.
All in favor?
Aye. Okay, communications.
Let's see. I don't have any communications. Sorry. I don't have any communications for the commission this evening, but there may be, I'll have to check our schedule. We may not have our next meeting, so you may get a little bit of a break. I'll be in contact.
Okay. Commissioner Mitchell.
Mr. Rep, I've got a suggestion. When we have an item that rolls from one meeting to the next, and the staff report gets updated and additional items get added, it would be really helpful if you could include somehow in the title on the, where on the website version where we can click on it and go review the item. I'm not saying this properly, but a way to show that the date that was added or revised. When we get these huge items and there's 20 exhibits, to know which ones have been added or revised since the last time without having to go, try to go back through and compare everything would be a huge help. Just that there some way to make it more clear what's been revised since the last meeting.
Great. We can do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We're adjourned.